And Lisa on the phone, it sounds like.
And
Correct?
number
Lisa, you on?
4?
Yes, that's us.
Perfect. Okay.
I think it always like callers.
Thompson, you're on?
STEM investment counselor.
Yes, I am, Jim.
Question for everybody.
Yes.
Okay.
And Lisa Graham's here.
Hi, Lisa. Okay, let's just go around the room. We'll see who are the council members here, and then we'll get started with the meeting. Go ahead.
Eric Meslow, TimberCon.
Ramona Flores.
Jim Byron, Portland General.
Mark Lewis, Team Education Office.
All right, we've got a full agenda today, a lot of good material. And I thought we'd just start with maybe an update from a number of the council members on what's going on. I was hoping Dwayne would be here. But a couple things I wanted to update you on is, first of all, Measure 98 rules are out for comment. I sent some language around. I'll pass that around today to see if anyone has any comments. I've given them to Mark to look at also. He was going to talk with Lindsay a little bit about them. But my concern was that there's a missing opportunity here to link the Measure 98 rules with the CTE STEM hubs that we've created, STEM hubs that we've created, to really ensure that if schools, high schools continue to move forward their ideas around CTE, that they use the hubs as a way to convene that conversation. So they're linked to career paths, as well as ensuring those programs tied to college education or college programs also. So I'll circulate those later, and I'll see if I can get some feedback from you by this afternoon, see if you're willing to support that. I think it's reasonable for us to raise those concerns just so that we leverage those Measure 98 dollars. As you know, Measure 98 was to improve high school graduations. It has 3 tracks, using the money for CTE STEM programs, secondly for dropout prevention, and the third is for just educational
Dual credit.
dual credits for college. And so I think it's going to be a challenge when you look at Measure 98. Some of the concerns by the folks that we've talked with is, first of all, it's really tough for the rural schools that are small. They get enough money through Measure 98 to actually start programs. And the second concern around CTE STEM programs is it takes a lot of money to start these programs up, and this is just a 2-year program, and it's not constitutionally driven, and so there's no guarantee the money will be here in the next biennium. And so there's some concerns by high schools as they try to move those programs forward. Didn't necessarily address that issue. That's a structural issue around Measure 98. It's not constitutional. So it's something we continue to want to push and discuss. So you've got copies of it. If you're supportive, I will maybe bring that up at the end of the meeting so you can have general support for that. Thompson, did you get them? And Lisa, did you get the comments?
Yes, I did.
got it. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. I also mentioned that the STEM Employers the CT STEM Employer Coalition continues to meet to talk about how we continue to push CT and STEM into our schools and to get the kind of outcomes we're looking for. We do have a bill that has been drafted to bring CTE and STEM together. It's a well thought out bill. It's to leverage the capability of both and really to integrate CTE and STEM. That bill has been introduced in the Education Subcommittee, I think it's called. Senate Ed Committee, and so they'll start working through the process. The real idea here is really to bring CT and STEM together. We know the importance of linking those. We started this process in the last legislative session. Didn't get all the way to the finish line just because there was too much going on. But clearly we saw the value of bringing those two together. So that bill's been introduced, and we'll work that through the process and see if we can get that together and then make the necessary adjustment. It is really best practices to link CT and STEM together. So that's the update I would provide you. Any of you have any updates on things going on CT and STEM related? You on the phone? Okay.
Thompson, did you have any updates?
No, all good.
Yep. This is Lisa, nothing from me.
Okay. All righty, good agenda. I'll turn it over to Mark to give an update on what's going on his side as we work through the budget process. The co-chair's budget is out there. And maybe Mark can talk a little bit about what he knows about what's in there related to ongoing funding of CT and STEM.
Yeah, thank you, Jim, and good morning, everybody. A couple things to update. Actually, there's several updates. I'll start with the budget. As I believe the council is aware, when the governor's budget came out she held harmless the vast majority of the STEM investments. A couple of the CTE investments that were part of House Bill 3782 were not included in that. One, the Pathways Fund, and two, summer programming. I'm thinking that in part, Measure 98 funds can partially compensate for some of those programs. We, as part of the budget situation that we are in, there were minor reductions, in minor being 10, 12% across the board for agencies that will hit those. So the current STEM investments. So while we've retained them, they're at a level that is slightly lower than our last biennium, than in the governor's budget. As you know, the governor's budget is just a starting point in terms of a much longer budget process for the state. The co-chairs released a budget which was a revenue neutral budget. So if the situation is that there is no additional revenue, they put forward a budget that called for potential cuts, that these things could be in jeopardy. Again, to some extent, that's a tool to drive additional legislative conversations over this session. So I don't think people should see that as a entire doom and gloom sort of scenario. But it is, stark, I think, for people to read that butcher's budget and see some of the things that could be up for discussion to potentially cut as a means for meeting our $1.8 billion shortfall.
In the governor's budget, how did the chief education office fare? Are you losing headcount in that budget?
I believe our request for, I don't know entirely. I think all agencies were asked to trim. I believe some of our positions that were on a temporary basis. I mean, there's some positions that don't have full authority for a full FTE, but you can start them up anyway. So we had a couple of positions.
Where are we staffed though as a council? We lost somebody recently, right? Are we down a person? And is there a hiring freeze until said budget is? So are we down a person?
One of our executive assistants is no longer with us, and we're going through a hiring process.
But you're allowed to hire right now.
So we're allowed to hire that position. There was a 60-day freeze on hiring. That ends February 10th. We've interviewed people. We're hoping to fill that. So.
No offense, I love you, man.
Hey, no problem.
So Seth is back. Yeah. So just, and that impacts my scheduling and some logistics.
And he's not working on the longitudinal database right now, right?
That's right. Yes.
Not this morning.
Not this morning.
Not this morning. Exactly, not this morning. So, so that's it. Any other questions from a budget standpoint? Okay, as Jim pointed out, Measure 98, the Department of Education is in the process of rulemaking right now. There are cross-agency conversations going on right now around Measure 98 implementation between ODE, the HEC, the Chief Education Office. Cool Hill, as we saw at our last STEM Council meeting, is really helping to coordinate that cross-agency piece from our office. Recently, reaching out to the STEM hubs and others to get comments and thinking about Measure 98 implementation, and that's getting a lot of attention right now. So I think some of the challenges, as Jim pointed out, the measure is silent on some things from a systems perspective that need to be addressed, particularly small schools. Some of the reporting burden that districts could face in order to hit fairly modest amounts of funds. And then there's just what the legislature will choose to do regarding the funding for it entirely is up for question as well as we move forward. So that's something to watch. Is as part of part of your package, you will see some of the STEM and CTE bills introduced. There is one around Measure 98 implementation that was introduced as an effort to make sure that that process continues to move forward through the legislative process and to take into account some of the concerns raised by agencies and districts. Turning to those STEM and CTE bills introduced, there's a number of them there. As Jim pointed out, Senate Bill 297 in particular, establishing the CTE STEM Investment Council, is coming out of the Senate Workforce Committee, actually, I believe, as it was introduced. And so that will be a major piece of conversation. And then Measure 98 from Senator Frederick, with Senate Bill 353. And some of the other ones are really ones that are related but not overly relevant, but I put them in there for you to for your information around that. There's two that modify House Bill 3072, which is where the STEM and CTE funding went through the last legislative session. So opening the door for some additional conversation around that funding. So we'll be watching that closely. One from Senator Roeblen, really looking at encouraging greater connectivity between districts and some nonprofit organizations, as well as addressing some of the fee structures that are part of that. And then also from the Department of Education, House Bill 2258 down at near the end of the list, really just included a one revision enabling student leadership organizations to be eligible recipients of those funds.
Senate Bill 443, that seems like a big one.
Yeah, it could be. This was introduced last biennium as well. So we'll see where that goes. We'll monitor that one closely.
Okay.
Some thoughts are.
So it died on the vine last session, you're saying?
I believe, if I recall, it died fairly early in session. So I don't know it's being reintroduced by the same bill introduced by two senators. So we're expecting that to be merged or discussed together, I would expect.
How much is the Oregon Opportunity Grant monies?
I don't know, right? Yeah, I can get that to the council. Okay. Any other questions regarding that for the time being? All right. I mean, fun time is starting soon, right?
Next week.
That's right. I've got a bunch of things on my calendar already, so we'll have fun there. The next council meeting is March 10th in Salem. So just a remembrance of that. That does give us an opportunity, if the council so desires, to, because we'll be in session, so we may want to have some ongoing conversations about whether or not, how we can use that opportunity to connect with some of the legislative bodies in a different fashion, perhaps. So we'll put that out there, and I'll be discussing that with Lindsay, of course, to get his take on that. Coming much earlier than that, there have been conversations around a multi-hub Metro Symposium on February 22nd. So I'm going to go to the lifeline and ask for Kristen Harrison to give a brief update to the council on that plan.
Sure, happy to. Thank you. Yes, February 22nd, we will be holding an event at Edgefield in Gresham. We will have likely every single STEM hub present and as part of the planning for that effort. We may have one or two that logistically have a challenge with having their directors there, but it'll be a statewide event. And so please do mark your calendars. There will be some early morning opportunities spreading through the morning and into lunch. So the hope is to catch folks when they can come. A couple of goals. One is to really give folks a sense of what does STEM programming, STEM opportunities, STEM education, what does that look like around the state? So folks can, we're inviting legislators from around the state to join us, as well as educators and other leaders, and of course, STEM representatives. So the goal is to get a sense for the state and a sense for your respective region, wherever that may be. And in addition to that, some of those very concrete stories that you get to hear from the educators and perhaps kids, but it is a school day and we do believe in them attending school, so there will likely not be very many students present. But the idea is to help give some really kind of visceral feeling for what it can be, and the many kinds of STEM education opportunities that kids are getting to experience all around the state, both during school time and out of school, both in STEM core content and in applied and CTE opportunities. So it would be wonderful to have you there. You will be receiving an invitation. So.
Just a thought, and obviously I've got a lot of planners. Legislators will be in session.
They will.
And you're talking about this Edgefield become out of Gresham.
Mm-hmm.
So how are we going to?
Logistically, we may get some folks on the way in. We also may get staffers and things like that. One of our goals around it is to have, we already have staffers from some of our different delegations confirmed to come. They can help recommend folks to testify later. They can help share some of that content. So it is a challenging time, definitely. Some of our federal folks might be able to come because they're not in session.
I was really wondering why you didn't look at Salem as the place to
Sure.
do this.
Well, some of our folks outside the metro area for STEM Hub, Salem is its own challenge in that way.
That's a planning that was actually started last year and got deferred as we were looking at engaging with the governor and launching of the STEM plan. And at this point, it's like, this is really an important thing to elevate visibility for STEM and be part of the cadence as we look then to the April 6th and 7th STEM Hub convening. And then in April, and then in the first week of May, STEM Week. So having these 3 touch points throughout session to get that visibility.
Have you coordinated at all with the CTE folks? Because they're going to be having a number of CTE days and events as well. So.
Yeah, we have not. I know that that has been a topic with the CTE Employers Coalition. I always like to mention where that is around Legislative Day.
Sure, thanks. So we are working on trying to coordinate a CTE STEM Day. So the department said that they don't actively plan that. So I'm working with Brian Krieg. We looked at dates. There were no dates during STEM Week. So that entire week is booked in the Capitol, but potentially late the week before there is a date. And so we're waiting on confirmation. And it could just be sort of going in the STEM Week, stretch STEM Week a little bit, perhaps, into the final days of April. And the idea there is to look at CTE and STEM and work with some student organizations and try to use that opportunity of STEM Week coming out. So more to come soon. We're just waiting on confirmation.
So good idea to warm the hubs up, though, that to be thinking, I guess, a little bit broader than just themselves right now, to start thinking about CTE efforts and not only wait for CTE to reach out to them, but maybe start pushing in the other direction. Because I know you guys are planning, and it'd be nice to start the conversation. And waiting on a lobbyist sometimes during sessions is a long way. So reach out.
Okay, thank you. No, I think that's good. There was probably something else, but I'll send you an email.
And just so you all know, there's likely to be a small protest out here at 10:30, nothing to be alarmed. Senator Merkley's having a protest against the appointment of the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, I believe.
Maybe we should adjourn and go join.
You see our government at work, so if you see it, don't be concerned. I think we got security and stuff like that. It should be peaceful.
Yeah.
So with that, we got a full agenda, and let's just jump right into it. lot of good material for those who got looked material ahead of time. A lot of good material to talk about, and we'll start with a conversation on metrics and the dashboard. Peter.
Peter, are you prepared? We'll give you control of the screen.
Great. Can you folks hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So just an FYI, it's really echoey if you're on the telephone. So if you have questions, it may be best to chat. I'm not sure.
Okay, we'll rely on Seth to type in anything in the chat. All right.
Okay. Yeah, it goes in and out. So can you see my screen?
Yes, Peter, we can.
Great. Thank you.
And we can see your chat box too, just an FYI here. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, and FYI to everybody else texting me. So, okay. So, thanks very much for the opportunity to talk with you. The way I'm looking at today's presentation is it's really both a report and it's an opportunity for our state longitudinal database team to get formative feedback from you on the development of some of our data visualizations. Our expected date of completion for the SLDS project is the end of this year, and we're now really accelerating the work with our developer on the visualization side. So although we haven't finished all of the import and conforming of data, we have a thread of work on visualization. And it's our intention to have a whole either section or portion of the SLDS dedicated to the interests of this council and then STEM education in general. So whether it's a dashboard or a series of visualizations, we really hope to be the home to look at a lot of the work that you folks are doing, and mostly because it's all longitudinal. Everything that you're doing is P through 20, and it's really meant to change systemic practices to produce a result that's way downstream. And we think that that fits really, really well with what the SLDS is designed to do. So I'm going to start talking about the design process for visualizations. And then at the end, we're going to look at the STEM metrics that are in the strategic plan to give you an update on how much of that data we have and don't. And I want to finish with enough time for folks to ask questions and give feedback. But as an advanced organizer, what I'm going to challenge the council to do or to think about is that a lot of the metrics that are used for all education, but just in the STEM plan, but for all education, tends to lead to a snapshot visualization. And since we have longitudinal data almost within our grasp, my challenge is to think about how a dashboard or any kind of STEM presentation can really be longitudinal in character. And you're about to see a bunch of examples, so that's why I ordered the presentation the way I did. So first off, what we've done internally with Mark and also with Hilda Rosselli and other members of our directors team is expose them to 3 different visualization frameworks or formats. The first one you're seeing on the screen now is called a chord chart. And these are not the best examples in the world, but they're what we shared with Mark and with Hilda. And what I want you to see in this diagram is these are hemispheres. There's a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere, and they can be points in time or they can be other things represented in the hemispheres. In our case, we're really interested in points in time, and they show pathways from one thing to another. So if you look on the bottom left-hand one, it's got pathways for males and females, and what they're going to are some numbers. But just ignore those numbers and imagine if those were degree types, or if those were occupation types, or if those were proficiency in math or whatever. You could show connections. These are not longitudinal, but you could also imagine doing this longitudinally. So we exposed Mark and Hilda to these, and in a minute, we'll show you what they came up with. We also showed everybody map of Oregon. This is really a basic visualization, but we talked a lot about how localizing things within a geography is important. And all of these maps can show movement. So we know, for instance, where students attend high school in terms of the place they attend. And we can look over time to see where they attended community college, where they attended a university, a professional technical school, and to some degree where they went to work. So we could start to think about not just places, but also places over time. And then the last visualization we exposed folks to is something from one of our partners at OBC, which is the education pathway as described by a Sankey diagram. So this pathway diagram where you see kind of snaky coils going up and down is called a Sankey diagram. And this was not invented by OBC or Oregon Learns. It's a visualization that we've actually really fallen in love with, that you can just get out of the software that we're working with to produce these. So we had our policy leaders look at those three, and then we did a lot of whiteboard design sessions with Chrissy and Mark and Hilda and others to try to think of how we would build these for STEM, for CTE, for teacher prep, for all the things that are longitudinal in nature that especially our office works a lot on. And those were helpful and fun sessions, and what they led to was a more specific description from our vendor about, it showed the picture that we came up with, but then it had a bunch of questions underneath it about what the report would look like. In this case, the report that's being analyzed is one on career pathways of educators. It's one for Hilda Rosselli. But we did a bunch of these with Mark on STEM, and I'm about to show you a couple. And what that's led to now, most up to date within the last week, is we've been working with our vendor within a visualization software called Cognos, which is a best-of-breed IBM product that we've licensed. And here we're working on a chord chart. And the next slide I want to show you is sort of where we are with the Sankey diagram. And for this one, I just want to pop out a PowerPoint for a second and share this live in a browser because it's more impressive. Can everybody see my browser window, my Firefox window?
Yep.
Okay, so what you have for you now is a version of a Sankey diagram. It's like the one that Oregon Learns produced, except it's made to be printed. Since it's just one color, it shows up good in black and white. But it's a really similar idea in this case. And these are all not right now informed by student-level data. They're just mock-ups, but they will be underneath student-level data, so that if it's my high school, I can zoom in to graduate high school, and I'll actually be able to get to unit record data if it's my students. If it's not my students and I'm a member of the STEM Council, for instance, I'll be able to zoom into these to a level that I won't be able to get to unit record data. I could get to county data or hub data, but I wouldn't be able to get to unit data. And what we've done just most recently, literally this week, is make one of these for STEM exclusively. And so this is one that was is the result of the design sessions with Mark. And it's not a finished product. It's really, again, just a mock-up. But I wanted to get your minds going on what this could look like. So you've got an early decision point of students meeting or not meeting your 8th grade math proficiency, which is one of your goals as a council. But then instead of just looking at that statically, this follows the progression of those particular students over time. I've included something called STEM concentrator. That term doesn't really have a definition yet, but we could make one, and we're hot in conversation with Mark on exactly how we define a STEM concentrator, exactly what that would be. So it's just a data definition question. We know what classes students are taking. So we could follow students up through their 4 two-year degrees and then ultimately into if they're employed in the STEM field or not. And these diagrams, these Sankey diagrams, are not restricted to just the 4 I picked here. You could look at 4th grade math meeting or not meeting. And there's other things that you could kind of plug in here dynamically as a user. So the Cognos system eventually will allow the user to pick 4 time points that they want to inquire into and then get one of these Sankey diagrams.
Peter?
Yes, and I'm at stopping point. So yes, now let me just stop and take questions about all that stuff.
This is Jim Pyro. As we think down the road, and if we're successful, we really want to look at CTE and STEM kind of integrated as, so the extent you can think about integrating CTE programs into this so we can see if kids that are exposed to CTE STEM experiences, that richness, if that's producing a result that gets to career jobs or STEM fields, I think would be helpful, because I have a belief that kids will go into CTE, they'll get CTE and STEM experiences, they may go on to a career in the CTE field, but they may also go on to college to get a degree. So I think seeing that and showing the relevance of CTE in their educational experience would be helpful. So just keep that in mind as you design this. And I think we're trying to encourage that. Obviously, Measure 98 might have some of that impact. But we do already have CTE programs. And observing that would provide us evidence that CTE integrated with STEM into the curriculum produces better outcomes.
Yeah, can you folks hear me? I accidentally stopped sharing my screen.
We can hear you, Peter.
Yeah, so Jim, great point. And yes, the answer is yes, we do. Actually, the definitions for CTE for students concentrating in a field are actually more defined, so that would be easier. And I'm interested as a researcher and a former high school principal and STEM teacher, how those two things track together. Because my intuition is that it's about, hands-on applied learning, and we might be able to subtly tease that out by looking at STEM and CTE and some of the courses that are making the most difference in the long run. So, yeah, we thanks for the feedback, and I completely agree. So I want to, if Mark or Seth, if you could reshare my screen. And then I want to invite other questions in about that visualization, because I zoomed through a lot of really good stuff. Are you still seeing my screen?
Peter, you're the presenter at this point, so you can share your own screen. I'm not able to share it for you.
I get it.
So I think Eric has a question.
You're up now, Peter.
I'll let him get through this portion.
Great.
All right. Peter, this is Eric Smeslow from TimberCon. Hey, I think this is fantastic. Obviously, what's going to be important is for us to be able to run lots of reports, do a lot of what-ifs, thens to see the data from a variety of different directions. My question is in regards to the K through 12 data set, and then moving on to the higher post-secondary education data set. We're coordinating with the HEC, I assume, in regards to getting the four-year institution and the community colleges data, or how is that its place, or how are we gonna track them as they go into post-secondary?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for the question. So currently the HEC and ODE are the only agencies which we're formally working with, but we are working avidly with the HEC, and they've got a couple of different data systems that are discrete even now within their system. So they've integrated as an agency. Their data systems are lagging behind, but they're integrating. So there's a community college data set that we are getting. There's the four-year data set, which has a lot of historical data that we're getting. And there's also other smaller data sets that are in process. They have GED information, information about private and private career schools, and other sets. So we are consuming their data. It's a continuing discussion about the different elements that are there and what will be a final part of the SLDS. And on that score, I'll just say the one function you can help provide me and for Mark is identification of the more specifics that you get as a council that you need to know as policymakers about data helps us sharpen our requests to both agencies about what we need to do our work.
Peter, this is Eric again, a follow-up question. I assume if the student leaves the state for their post-secondary education, we lose them in the data set.
No. So there's two options to track them. First off, there's a school clearinghouse data set, National School Clearinghouse, that our state licenses that allows us to track students with some degree of fidelity everywhere they go. And that's going to be something that we're going to have as a second version of their post-secondary career. And then thirdly, there's a consortium of Western states that coordinate together on a number of issues, not just data. It's called WICHE, the Western Interstate Coalition of Higher Ed, I think is what that stands for. I could be wrong. But they coordinate data sharing, which includes employment data sharing, and Oregon has participated at least a couple of years ago, and I believe we still have participation within a number of Western states to do a level of data sharing beyond. So it's a high level of interest for Oregon, but also, for instance, for Idaho to track its graduates going to Oregon.
Okay.
So,
and then final.
That's it. We're working hard.
That sounds great. And a final question would be around working with labor and unions in regards to apprenticeships, because we value those very highly as CT and STEM pathways as well. And now you're dealing not with a government agency, you're now dealing with private individuals. So have you reached out at all to the labor unions?
We haven't. I put that, boy, I'm getting a ton of echo from me. Is my echoing in there?
Sound great.
Okay. I'll just ignore what I'm hearing. So we have not, I put that in a group of maybe phase 2 initiatives once we've got the core data set in place. What are the next things to reach out to? And I'll give you another STEM example that I was aware of just a couple days ago. There's a SMILE program, which has tracked student-level data of students who participated in after-school activities longitudinally that we don't have access to as a state, but exists there. And I guess the next level of inquiry is once this is solid, and we're not there yet. We're actually not going to be ready with this data system to the end of the year. But that's a phase 2 or phase 3 that we're very excited about. And I think apprenticeships would be a really, really interesting thing to look at longitudinally. But the answer is not yet. But I appreciate the comment and suggestion. Any other questions on the idea of developing iteratively these reports for the SLDS?
Unmuted.
Okay, so I'd like to cover my last.
Peter, this is Dwayne Johnson.
Yes.
Can you break this data down by ethnicity, by location, so we can see a difference between urban and rural populations? Is it possible to do that with this pool of the data in such a format where the information is available?
Absolutely. So we're working with the developer on what are the ways that we're always going to want to be able to break any of these data down. So we've got all the demographic characteristics that you would imagine, gender and race, ethnicity, all that stuff. And then we've got regions. So we've got regions by district, county, ESD, community college catchment area, workforce investment, regions, RAC, STEM hub. Pretty much all of those are going to be clickable. And the only issue is going to be if you're worried about privacy and you're listening to me talk, there'll be no report that can be generated for a user that allows for the depiction of really, really small cell sizes of information. So if I were to ask for someone who majored in a specific area in a specific gender and a specific race who came from a specific county, I won't be able to get any data unless that's a really, really large step. So while it will be very powerful, there will be, especially around rural data, rural/ethnicity kind of combinations where you won't be able to get a thing unless you have a higher level of access, like if you were a researcher or something like that.
That was awesome.
This is really great work. This is absolutely the kind of material and information we need, and I would think the council's endorsing the work you're doing here, because clearly we have to measure what we're doing, and this gives us the tool to watch that. And I think it reinforces that this is going to take some time, and we can watch it work through the system, and your data will help us track that. So this is really, really exciting and very good work, and appreciate all your commitment to this. And I will tell you, the STEM Council is enthusiastic about the work you're doing here.
Mark, how's the funding on this in regards to, do we have the commitment of the Chief Education Office for this, and it's properly fully funded and staffed? And
Absolutely. Sure, perhaps you can.
The funding, yeah, I mean, funding for SLDS was maintained at 100% of what it was proposed. So, of course, there's a process that moves forward, but all indications are that it's fully funded.
Awesome.
I know you guys need to move forward. My last slide gives you an update on your STEM strategic plan and the state of the data, whether or not it's coming in VSLDS or if there's any problems. And you'll see it's about 50% being green. So I proposed to Mark that I come back to future meetings to talk more about this over time, and maybe this is one we want to delve deeper into, especially the ones that are red. If there's things that we might do to the data, to the metric that would get it into the green state, that might be a great conversation. Mark, I don't know. I feel like we're probably running out of time, but I don't know if we want to talk at all about this slide.
I think we would want to come back because there's so many details regarding the reasons behind the availability of some of these data. But just for the council, again, these were the indicators that we had put forward from the metrics subcommittee and put forward in the STEM education plan. And we knew at the time that some of them would be difficult to actually glean, but it was important to put them out as desirable data to have to assess the state of the broader system.
Can I suggest that maybe Lisa, as leader of the STEM subcommittee on metrics and data, maybe hold a subcommittee meeting on this to really dig into this, ensure we're going the right direction and give further feedback. So maybe I'll pitch that off to Lisa, but I do think it'd be worth a subcommittee meeting on this to make sure that it's aligned with what we're doing, to get some information and just to continue to provide feedback. So,
Yep, absolutely, Jim. I think it's a great suggestion. Happy to take that one on. I'm very, very impressed with the analysis so far and want to learn more about the software and these things anyway, so that's perfect.
Perfect. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, yep. Thank you, Peter, for your work here. This is really exciting, as I mentioned, and keep up the good work and look forward to further reports on this from the data subcommittee. Okay.
You bet. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter.
Okay, let's move on to the next agenda item, which is the STEM Hub Progress Report. This was a report done to evaluate the effectiveness of the STEM Hubs, and I looked at the material. I think it was a great piece of work, and we have a number of people here to talk to us about it. Chrissy.
Good morning, Chair Pyra, council members.
Peter, could you give me control back, please?
You left and you're out.
Yeah, he's still on there. Yeah, we've been shut out.
Is it under general stuff? How do I do it?
It's under screen. Oh, we got it. We took it back.
You got it? Oh, great.
Okay.
Now that we're in control. Along the theme of, metrics and research and understanding investments, we've been doing a lot of work to think about value add around one of your largest, recommended investments as a council, the STEM Hubs. And also in thinking about capacity building for the system,
and trying to sort of assess where we're at as we go along. So I'm happy to have been able to work with Oregon State University, the Center for Research on Lifelong STEM Learning, in this endeavor, and the Education Policy Improvement Center. So I'll let these folks do a quick introduction of themselves, and then we're going to kind of let them take it away to show us an interim report. So we have a year-long pilot around some of this work, and this is sort of the intersection of that to give you an update before we get to a final stage in June.
All right. So just to let you know who we are, most of you do probably. I'm Martin Storksteg. I'm the director of the center, and I let the other ones introduce themselves, and one of us could not sit at the table here. So that's a chair.
Plenty of chairs.
We brought a band. So.
First you did all the work, right?
It's a team effort. So yeah, let them introduce themselves. So I'm the director there.
I'm Kari O'Connell, and I'm one of the senior researchers on staff at the center.
And I am Brianna Keys. I am a research analyst.
I'm Tracy Busolo. I am a research associate at the Educational Policy Improvement Center in Eugene, and my colleague Matt Kim could not make it today, but he's also working on this one part. He wouldn't have
We
got a lot of people working on this.
We get to that, but there are two organizations that worked on this research, and we actually coordinated quite considerably in this work. Two different projects, but for the sake of efficiency and for the sake of not asking lots of people from different directions, lots of questions that is confusing, we collaborated heavily on this. So this is a kind of a mixed thing between us. You'll see that. And I also want to mention that it is a snapshot in time. It's an interim report of work that's ongoing. And ongoing means we don't even have all the data yet. We haven't analyzed everything yet, and there's more to come. So it is to be seen as a snapshot in time, but one that hopefully gives you a little bit of direction of where we're going with this. Next slide, maybe. And before we get into a STEM Hub evaluation, part of an evaluation of this, I want to say, is to understand what it is that we're doing. Putting an engineering hat on and say, what's the underlying conceptual drawing of a STEM Hub? And independently of what the state has put out and said, you guys want to fund this, go back and say, well, is this based on any solid research that's out there already? And the answer is yes. So what you see here in this picture is what you see here in this picture is a representation of what a local STEM ecosystem might look like. It comes from a recent National Academy of Science report on supporting out-of-school learning. That actually, instead of saying how does out-of-school learning needs to be, it said, well, out-of-school learning is part of a larger local or ecosystem learning ecology of a child. And it turns things around a little bit. Instead of looking at an institution, putting that in the middle and say, what does this institution do and how can we help that institution? It says, well, how about we put the learner in the middle and ask ourselves and invert this whole thing and ask ourselves, what can we do to support that learner, no matter where that learner is and what that learner does, so that there's a coherent system around it. This idea is not new. It came from Uri Bronfenbrenner, and this was a foundation for Head Start in the 60s, where this philosophy was first developed. It was independently reintroduced into education in the recent years and is taking considerable hold. And when you see here, it says basically that there are concentric circles around the learner that support the learner, and each institution, and close to the learner are those who touch the learner, it's a child. It can be parents, it can be caregivers, role models, and so on and so forth. And then everything that's around it, the home environment, the neighborhood, and so on and so forth, and the schools, and so on and so forth. And then around that are all the things that influence these influencers. And around that is broader influences on the influencers. So there's culture and government and values and history, and all of that changes over time. Now, it sounds terribly complicated. How do you actually influence? How do you make something like this happen? Well, guess what? Your STEM Hubs does that. Or at least that's the idea behind it. Now, it doesn't happen automatically, just to get us into our study. It happens when you create some structures that allow this kind of ecosystem around the learner, this learning ecosystem, to appear. And there's lots of work being done on, and you know these terms, probably network improvement communities and communities of practice and collective impact. And in fact, when you look at these, there are certain design principles that are more likely from theory and from what previous research has shown to enable that those who care about this child here in the middle and that child's learning and well-being will work together. And what you can see is when you go back, it's clear that the STEM Hub system was invented and created, not invented, but designed based on this literature. You go back to the literature and look at how you designed this. Turns out, yes, the double check back, that is something we can confirm has been done well. Now I want to mention that, and this comes from a conversation that Eric and I had a while ago. What is the purpose of a hub? Is a hub something special you give to a place so that they can innovate? That's one way to think about it. Or is the hub something that should be everywhere? Because it's now our understanding, when you look at the literature, we're moving in a direction where you don't think of institutions as isolated actors and compete with one another within a local ecosystem, but we're saying, no, for the benefit of the learner, you need to coordinate. And that kind of suggests, at this point in time, at least the way the literature looks, that you ought to have this such that every child is touched by some of those ecosystems. What does it mean? Now that's a challenge. And the challenge we will talk about in a moment. So next slide. This study was actually designed, or let's say, I'll talk about it as a study, but in fact there was two different studies and there's all sorts of complication around it, but for the purpose of making sense of it, let's say there's one study done by a bunch of people and we don't care who that is. And that study looks at two components of what a hub, or the infrastructure that supports a hub does. We talked about this. So for collective impact and for this kind of ecosystem institutionally to exist, we need to have partners that coordinate, roughly speaking. All the partners that potentially play a role as stakeholders in the learning progress and pathway of the child. That said, in order for these partners to work together, we also know from the literature you need to have what's called a backbone organization. And needs to be effective. And there are criteria for that you have laid out. And what we are looking at right now is this interim snapshot report, is the idea of two ideas. Number one, do we see evidence that these local communities are beginning to gel, that they are developing? That something is happening here that allows them to coordinate in ways and do things in ways they couldn't have done unless they had this hub structure, number one. So it's communicable. The second part is, and do we have evidence that the investment you has made into this kind of structure, this backbone structure that allows potentially these hubs to exist and to grow and to strive, do we have evidence that this is done effectively so that you can say to legislators and others, yeah, this investment is worth it. So that's basically what the study is that we did together. Right, next slide. Briefly, where we were, so in the fall, we did surveys with STEM Hub leaders and partner organizations, not just people who are directly employed and drive these hubs, but those who are these stakeholders. We followed up with interviews. Actually, it's fall, it's winter, but you see that we did the interviews in the future, and then we're coming back. Winter 2017, yes. So we're ongoing interviews to give more substance to that. We are creating reports, this is an interim report, but there will be actually another round of data collection that will follow in the spring and early summer that looks at the connectivity between these hubs, because we don't just see hubs as individualized places, but at some point it's part of Oregon, and there's connections between them potentially. So next slide. We're going to Tracy.
Oh, now we're going to me. So the Educational Policy Improvement Center has been working with the Chief Education Office around the STEM hubs and the RACs as well for the past couple of years. And our role initially, we came on to help build out some frameworks for the STEM hubs, some long-term planning kinds of things. We also did interviews with the STEM hubs in the first year to develop out some profiles of where they were going, what were their missions, and we also did that again this past summer. So kind of we have a finger on the pulse of where they're going. And so one of the things that we did in conjunction with STEM Hub and RAC leaders was to look at the backbone structure for each one of these organizations and determine what were some essential functions of the backbone. What are the things that are really going to contribute to the success of the backbone as the organizers and the conveners of the hubs that kind of pull everything together. And one of the pieces of the puzzle that we came up with here was to help to develop, in terms of a capacity building feature, help to develop some measures for the STEM hubs to use in a kind of a self-reflective and assessment kind of way so that they can gather some information that is consistent across all of the STEM hubs and be able to use this to speak to the greater community about how their partners feel about how things are doing, and also to examine internally. So we have, our research questions are more focused, as Martin was saying, we're all kind of interested in the bigger picture of the STEM hubs and how they're working across Oregon, but we're also looking very specifically for our piece at the backbone infrastructure and what are the successes, what are the challenges, what are they across all of the STEM hubs, but also what are the contextual factors, because we have the STEM hubs in different regions, they have different goals, different missions, and different populations that they're working with. And so what are those pieces, what are the contextual factors that go along with kind of the quantitative measure that we're looking at here. So what we did, if you could go up to the next slide, please. When we talk about the survey that we did, we, in conjunction with OSU, put together a fairly large survey. This was sent out to the STEM Hub leaders who then sent this along to their partners as well. And just some preliminary results before I talk about our specific part. This just gives you a snapshot of who the respondents, the partner respondents specifically were by sector. As you can see, the education community, this does include community colleges, universities, and school districts that work with the STEM hubs. It represents the greatest portion of the partner respondents, but we do have the community, that would be things like local museums, nonprofit organizations, and advocacy centers, and then a slightly smaller slice represented by the business and industry. This is small businesses as well as up to large corporations. St. Alphonsus Medical Center in Mount Pierre County is something that comes to mind there.
How big of a response did you get?
So as of we put a cutoff date as December 31st, I believe, for this interim report. As of that point in time, we had a total of 151 completed responses. 31 of those were from backbone staff or leaders, and 120 of them were partners. We have received a considerable number of more responses there, which is why we're calling this
better than I thought you would have done.
We actually, our response rate, we work in research, and survey response rate is one of those things that you are nervous about. We do know how to pester people. We know how to pester people, but our survey, I think our final survey response rate will be 60-70%. So yeah, pretty
the hubs have played a huge role.
And that in itself speaks to the coordination of the hubs themselves, right?
One important thing about this response rate, we have a considerably larger response rate, a huge response rate from hubs that have been in existence for longer. Clearly, for their partners, it made more sense to build something else than those who barely had ever met. So you see that there's a difference between those in existence for a while with much more to say and those who barely just started. So
that's great.
Okay. So we're happy about that.
Right. Yeah, well, there's one example.
Yes, one example.
Was a lot.
Okay, next slide, please. So one of the piece that EPIC is focusing on in terms of looking at the satisfaction of the STEM Hub staff, the backbone staff, and the partners, we have built off an existing instrument that is in the research and builds off of research around collaboration and what are the success factors for collaboratives working together. And it has these subscales based on several different constructs that are considered to be important to the success of the backbone. And so, the first one we were just talking about here about the progress towards the goals. And we have this everything divided up by the STEM Hub staff versus the partners. And as you can see here, for the most part, satisfactory progress in terms of their satisfaction with the goals, STEM Hub staff there, and a certain amount on the executive progress. Next slide, please. All right, here's where we're getting to where I thought we were on the previous slide. So for the collaboration assessment tool, we looked at this scale has a strongly disagree to strongly agree down at the bottom. Context, the first construct that we're looking at here, this subscale refers to shared history and context between collaboratives and their partners and the collaborative's role within the greater community. Members, which you see is one of the highest satisfaction rates here. We have designed to put data about skills, attitudes, and beliefs of the collaborative members. So the relationships that exist within the STEM hubs, both for the backbone staff and the partners. Process has to do with the different functions the process is enacted by the collaborative to achieve their goals and objectives. And communication is formal and informal communication, both between both collaborative members and outreach to the larger community. And you can see for yourself where things are at this point. Next slide, please.
Question?
Yes, please. I'm sorry.
Was it clear what their goals were when they asked the question? Did you ask them that question? Are your goals clear?
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
Your goals of the hub. As you're asking them how they're performing against their goals, is it clear that they understood what their goals were? And
we didn't give them the actual goals of the individual STEM hubs, so that wasn't a part of the survey. But in some of the feedback that we got, we also did ask open-ended items around there, and this is something that will be in the interim report after we had a chance to kind of clean this up. That was something that was referenced by some of the respondents, is that they felt that some of the goals were not as clear as they would like them to be. You know, you do have, we had already gone on from there, you know, a pretty high level of satisfaction, but that's something that people felt could be worked on. So the next one, yeah, we're at function here. So this subskill refers to the articulation of the goals and objectives of the collaborative, which is kind of what we were talking about right there. Now, the next one you'll notice, this is the lowest across all of the items. It has to do with resources. And the items in here is funding.
That's finding of every single thing.
Yeah.
In regards to funding, is the amount, you know, oftentimes in organizations like this, not necessarily the amount of the money, it's the certainty of the money that causes things. Did we have any questions around that specific issue?
There are several items in the resources section that break it down. So this is just a subscale. So there are many items that make up this particular subscale that do talk about certainty and I feel confident about the future. And then in the open-ended items, that's where that really comes out, where people were able to respond and talk about what they would like to see in the future, what would make them more confident, or what one thing that they could do to be more successful. Did you have something that you guys wanted to contribute there?
The other thing I would like to understand is the difference for resources to support the hubs versus resources to implement the programs.
Right.
Because that's a little different. They may say I have enough for my hub, but I need more resources to push my programs that could produce the kind of goals and results we're trying to achieve. So
yeah.
Tease this out, it's important to differentiate that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll write that down there. The next to last one here, the leadership, this refers to presence of successful collaborative leader characteristics. This is one of the highest that we saw. So, and a lot of mention in the open-ended items, very specifically calling out the strength of the leadership that they saw across the STEM hubs.
That's one important resource question.
Yes.
Is it more than just money, right?
Yeah.
In other words, it's like facilities, it's like access to education.
They mentioned increased staffing, and we'll show that number in one of the open-ended questions. So that would be the one place I think that they.
Right. I mean, staffing in terms of resources, you know, I would say that the big picture here was around just the certainty of going forward and getting other people to come on board, knowing that there's already a stable funding source moving forward. And that was one of the big ones. The last subscale was actually not on the collaboration assessment tool. We did add this in because of the Chief Education's Office interest in data and how the hubs are using data and disseminating data to their partners. This was one that was a little bit lower than, as you can see, than some of the other items on the scale, but we will continue to look a little bit more deeply into these.
So take care of that one, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, did we, given the charge of the Chief Education Office and an emphasis of this council on issues related to equity, did we ask questions around that particular issue, and does that show up in terms of
That's coming up in the next part, so, yeah. So, yeah, I'll keep you moving through, but we will come back to that. Next slide, please. I just wanted to end my piece here before I move on to the OSU folks. One of the other things that EPIC has been doing is looking at specific ways that partners and STEM hubs have been working closely together. So what ways are the partners championing the efforts of the STEM hubs? And just wanted to provide you with a quick snapshot of some examples of ways that STEM hubs and partners are working together, specifically connecting after-school organizations with community institutions to build quality STEM-focused programs. Bringing the local industry partners directly into the classrooms. There was a lot of talk when we talked with the business industries around CTE and really building that connection between the CTE and the workforce into the classroom as well. The professional development and student learning activities across large geographical areas, that's a really big thing for a lot of people. And then STEM hub expertise in areas like NGSS, understanding the NGSS, and developing and piloting assessment tools for use in out-of-school settings.
Which is the next generation science standard.
I'm sorry I didn't say that, but yes. And so that's our piece, and I'm going to turn it over to Kari for the next piece.
We're not going to switch back and forth.
Yeah, we're going to switch. Yes. So since our broad question is there a community involved in this? Does it make a difference for the community partners? So one thing is to have an organization, the other thing is a community involvement. And we broke that down in a few sub-questions, like how do people recognize what the hub is? What do they think it is? What do they think it's doing? What has it accomplished? Is it working well for them? Is it healthy in the sense that do they have a contribution to make? Does the hub appreciate their contribution? And are hubs connected with one another, and how are people connected between the hub? That's the last one we haven't gotten to quite yet. We have some data on that. That's quite interesting. Next slide. This one we just put in here to torture you, but it actually speaks. And you can look at this, and I'll tell you a story about it. What we did here is ask people, and this is now, remember, stakeholders, members broadly of our community, and partners, the people who are staffers. Like, what is this hub about? Yes, no. And we have multiple, this is the columns of this table, multiple options that we give them. So hubs can be about preparing students for STEM careers, it can be about improving K-12 STEM education, it can be about increasing graduation rates or reaching underserved communities, it can be about improving or providing CTE, providing early learning experiences, improving out-of-school learning opportunities for the students, or providing teacher professional development, or supporting local STEM workforce development. We gave these as options, and then people rated what it is. We give you the numbers for STEM hubs that we have considerable numbers from the STEM hubs themselves as examples. This is a snapshot. To give you a sense that when you look at some of those core functions, this is people saying yes or no. Right? And the number of people within these STEM hubs, the percentage of people within the STEM hubs who agree that this is what the STEM hub is about. Now a STEM hub can be about a bunch of stuff. And in fact, that's exactly what you see here. When you go down the columns, you see that there are some columns that have very high numbers in them. These are the kinds of things that everybody seems to be agreeing STEM hubs are about across the STEM hubs. They're all, in some ways or another, to a large degree, about improving K-12 STEM education, preparing students for STEM careers. Clearly, that's an important piece. And with minor different opinion on teacher professional development, this part of that. So things that are rated above 50, you can say is probably happening. Things that are below 50, probably not so much. And this is where you can see that the characteristics between the hubs, when you go in the row, there's slight pattern differences. They all agree about certain things that every hub does, but how the hub itself is being perceived by members of the hub differs from hub to hub. So there's slight differences, and that is a sign that hubs indeed recognize clearly that they have different foci because their situation is different. It would have been actually interesting to see if everything had been the same. You kind of wonder, why is that when you are in Eastern Oregon versus somewhere else? This wouldn't have been good. At the same time, you wouldn't want to see something here that says some of those key components are being downgraded. That said, that's the main message here. There's difference between them, but there's agreement on some of the core functions. Now you can see, however, that some hubs, for instance, I'll give you an example in providing early learning experiences. Nobody is asked to necessarily do that, but some do more of that, others probably considerably less, it's not perceptible to members.
And that maybe is a huge opportunity.
Yeah, so
Totally funded.
you can see that. You can see that while most hubs that we have here now pay some attention to CTE, some may pay less attention to it. And that is actually another opportunity where you say, well, from the discussion that we just had, we want to be proactive about bringing CTE in, if that's what we want. We want to be proactive about it. It might not happen unless you have a conversation.
Martin, have these data been actually shared with the STEM hubs themselves?
Not yet. It's one of those things where we would normally not share it unless we had this meeting here, because it's preliminary and
I think that's an important.
Yes, we will share all
As
this
preliminary data.
Yeah, we will do that. Next
Sounds
slide.
like at the Edgefield of Revere.
Or earlier. Without libations.
And what we haven't done, for instance, is you can look at each of these hubs and see, well, to what degree do people within a hub agree or disagree? So what's the standard deviation within the hub? So the homogeny, do hubs internally recognize themselves in some formats here?
And we did not provide any primary and secondary ranking of our goals for these hubs from our organization to you to be able to compare the results against.
We haven't done that yet.
So, to say what are our priorities? Going back to that, if everybody hadn't been in the 80s or 90s, we haven't been in trouble. By the time they get out to early education, it's not a bad thing that some are only 24%.
Yes,
so how are we grading them in regards to the data?
Well, A, we're not grading them. And
then why are we doing this?
Well, we're not, because we want to know what they're about.
Understood,
but a question about
you're talking to a manager, right? So as soon as you bring up any KPI, I'm going to use it to change behavior. Right? So I'm just asking a simple question.
Priorities, it's a feedback loop piece. So like we have priorities that are often shifting.
Yeah.
And then, we have local priorities. And the really interesting thing about this is there's an opportunity to see what has been priority, what have we reflected as priority, where do we want to go now, and sort of.
Understood. And again, I'm being a little bit harsh about it, but I think the point is that we have some priorities, some things that we owe back to our masters in regards to, we got to hit these top level things firmly. Everything that happens below it, some of it's going to be great, some of it we want to emphasize into the future, but right now we got to make sure we're hitting our top goals.
And I would say that table shows you you're hitting the top goals.
Yeah.
But one thing that, particularly with the discussion about CTE, you can see there's growth potential. So this is a higher priority now. We can communicate that and make sure that's the case. So if you want to see that CTE thing be more in the 90s, next time we do this, clearly action is needed.
And I think it's important for us to recognize the historical development of these. The intent was never to create cookie cutter types of hubs. The regionalization has always been a really critical part of the relationship with the STEM hubs and the regions that they represent. In the initial guidance that went out 4 years ago, there were some emphasis that were placed, including equity, including P20, including student engagement, including educator professional learning, including creating an ecosystem that connects to out-of-school learning as well. And hubs were encouraged to certainly prioritize those and build a local context around those. So I just think that is really, really important for us to recognize that that the relationship that is developing is a co-supportive relationship, and we can work to prioritize certain things like equity and like educator professional development, like industry engagement, and we need to do that alongside and with our regional partners.
Yeah, and again, there's a lot of secondary, third level missions that I think we can all agree have value, but the concern I have, and we can talk about this offline, is simply that if we don't emphasize our first tier responsibilities and clearly set those expectations within the hubs, you will find a second or third that may rise to the first position
which puts us in danger of losing the cohesiveness of the idea and the concept to the legislature.
Maybe an interesting activity that sort of each start, like what.
Yeah, there's got to be a foundation
What
that
are
we
your
don't
top?
deviate from.
Yeah.
And if we're not clearly setting an expectation with the hubs that, STEM education better be first in a STEM hub and not early childhood education, right? I'm just saying we have to set some boxes, I think, in regards to what the expectations. You must take care of these things first. You're taking care of these things first, then you can go ahead and do second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth mission.
I'd spin it a little differently, and that is that when we look at 40, 40, 20, right? And that's why we're here, right? Part of why we're here. So I need to show up somewhere in the levels that are coming out of the hub. But they have different ways of organizing their organization, their relationship, and their priorities. However, the ones we are actually looking for have to be connected to the things that created this organization, which is why we're actually doing some investments that come behind it. So it then becomes a question of, well, when are you going to get to that? Okay, and there may be answers that are different out of each one of these areas because it takes different things to spin up those activities. Okay, so I think it's incumbent on us to be able to say, here are our top 30. Okay, so how are you getting there? And what are the measures for that to show you're getting there if you're looking at that?
Let's just went back.
Okay, let's
Where you provided any of those.
It's just 2 quick words. 2 words. 2 quick points. One, there is a resource element to this, and we need to also recognize that just saying so doesn't make it so. And that we have not resourced the hubs sufficiently to do all things. So that's A. And then B, as we develop a robust and resilient and effective ecosystem, I believe very strongly, and I think it's conveyed in the STEM education plan as well, that the voice and the priorities of our regions have to be considered as part of that prioritization effort. It is not, at least that is the philosophy of the Chief Education Office in all of our regional efforts. And so that is a dynamic that needs to happen in partnership, and each having different roles and different visions that doesn't balkanize the work in that we're prioritizing the individual need of a particular hub. The role of this council is to look broader and more systemically and to provide that perspective that pushes back on I guess, radical regionalism. But just recognizing that that is a conversation, not a compliance. The compliance culture in our system is actually detrimental. It's one of the things that we're fighting against in these efforts.
And I want to mention, just from the perspective of an external outside person looking into this, these data that we just showed are actually very competent in the sense that priorities have been made, hubs have been responding.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And we could, again, I think we could move on.
We gotta move on. I don't think there's
They got more.
They've got more about focus and prioritization.
Further comment.
Let's move on.
Yeah, okay, so this is, I'm gonna be talking about the next few slides here. So on a real positive note, we asked the partners and the backbone staff who responded to this survey to give us one positive change as a direct result of the work of the STEM Hub. This is a figure with % responses. And before I talk a little bit about some interpretation, I just want to point out a couple things that are important to know when looking at this figure. Well, for one, in that we use emergent coding for these answers. This was not a multiple choice. The last table you saw actually gave them these options, and they said yes or no. And this is different. These were open-ended responses, and so we worked as a team to code these. So that's an important thing. The other is to note that we asked them for one positive change. Now, some of them couldn't help themselves and gave us more than one. But if you think about it, that's kind of their, like, what's top on their heads. So that's just something important to keep in mind, too. So when you look at even some of what maybe some of us would think are, 5%, 7%, those are kind of low numbers. But these are really important, especially to some individual hubs and where they are. So just something to keep in mind for this in the next figure.
So, well, I just would like to say that there were a wide variety of responses to this question, many examples of positive changes. And following along with what Mark just brought up, I wrote it down, and what he said were some of the major goals: student engagement and professional development. And you'll see that the highest percent, the highest response of the one positive change was related to student programming, directly engaging students in programs. And then professional development programming was also another high one as well. The other ones to look at on the left end of the graph, communication, collaboration, implementation, and increased awareness. You could kind of put those all in a real broad category of development of the community of the hub itself. And the other on the right side, most of the programming ones you can think of, this is programming that's been implemented. So that was something that was brought up earlier in that, you know, people are reporting programming they've done, and then people are reporting the development of the community. And if you look at the communication one all the way on the left, and actually why don't you go to the next slide for this, we're giving you some examples of these accomplishments. The communication one, we did look at the established hubs versus the most recent hubs. We don't have a complete data set, but in an initial look, there was a higher percent of the new hubs that reported communication as their accomplishment, which is what we'd expect from a new hub. So that was just interesting to look at. So it's just some examples in student programming, developing a pathway for students to be exposed to STEM. Implementation, an example is where we saw people actually talking together, collaborating, and then implementing. We were cautious. We coded things when we actually saw it in what they said. Communication, I mentioned that one. And the other one is resources access. Again, we saw some of the newer hubs report this more often. Working together to increase access to resources. Okay, next slide. So this is another one of our open-ended questions that we asked, and similar to the last one, we asked one change that will make the STEM hub more successful, and we did get, you know, some of them did say more than one change for this one as well. And again, we used emergent coding. This was not a multiple choice, so we took at face value what they said, and again, we're seeing even some of these lower numbers are important because this was quite what was top on their mind when they took the survey. So, no surprise, look what the highest one is sustained funding. So I don't think that's maybe a surprise to anyone in this room. That was the most common response, but also followed by some other important ones. External communication and outreach was a big one. Strategic planning, increased staffing, those were all important responses that the hubs gave us. And I'm kind of just barreling along. Martin, do you have anything you want to add to these slides?
Maybe also what you see is when you do emergent coding, what we did, they give you back what the issues are. So we didn't give them issues. They gave us the issues. That was the previous one, that's the same thing. They give us in their words. We don't provide it to them. That's an important thing. So each category that emerged is actually in and of itself important, irrespective of how many people mention it. It was important to a certain number of people, enough that we would code it separately. And you can see that for somewhere although, like partnership improvement, there are issues that have to do with how the community should develop and whose voice is being heard and who's included and who's not. That one then pays attention even if the numbers are low for the future. That's just, of course, the don't know and nothing is the kinds of people who are then either totally happy with what's happening, it couldn't be any better, or they were simply lazy and didn't want to fill it out. You never know that, but just to give you a sense, it's the categories themselves that are also important to pay attention to.
And if you're looking at the copy that you have in front of you, just note if you ever want to go back and refer to it, I think for some of these we had numbers in the copy we sent to you and these are percentages, so just if you're wondering why numbers are different. Why don't you go to the next slide, please. Okay, so then this is a different part of our survey where we're really looking at trying to understand where the STEM hubs were with health. And we asked them to respond to a Likert scale type questions. And we asked them, we had about 14 questions that were related to the health of the STEM hub. And we asked them to respond strongly disagree to strongly agree. And we chose two figures to show for this instead of showing all 14 of them. And this first one is kind of an example of what we saw overall. And this one in particular was I had open and honest exchanges with other partners in the STEM Hub. And we had other questions about, I have voice, I trust the people, other people on the STEM Hub, we respect each other, we, some around communication. And overall, these are the kind of responses we got, this very positive, agreed, strongly agreed kind of answers with really low, strongly disagreed and disagreed. And in some cases, there weren't even anyone reporting one in the strongly disagreed and disagreed. Oh, okay. Okay, so then go on to the next.
Pay no attention to the
I know, okay, well, I know we're all running out of time. This is just one other example where we saw a potential area that might help improve, that some people, again, still a pretty low number, but people responded, to this question, another similar one to influence over decision-making, where there were a few strongly disagree responses. But again, we're talking pretty positive nature overall. I'm done with that. Yeah, okay.
Before that,
I'm going to jump in here and talk about what the leverage funding that does.
Yeah, just because I know that's one of the.
Yeah.
And then just before we go next step, the summary of this, so there's a summary of that, what we see across the data that we've looked at and that you haven't seen, is that what we see here is indeed hubs are developing community and the members of the hubs are recognizing that, but there is still work to do. Like it's a positive and one of growth that is still needed. We're not there yet. We haven't created perfect communities around this. We've started.
So as you can see, there's a lot of passionate people that are really interested in the work that we're doing here. We've had a good time putting this all together and learning more about the STEM Hubs. Our next steps include finalizing the interim report next week. So all of this information will be put together into more than just a few slides here for an interim report. We do have some data analysis, data collection and analysis to complete, including social network analysis with the OSU folks. A piece that I did not mention before, that's something that EPIC has been working on also, is that we are examining the leveraged funding that is occurring across the STEM Hubs in terms of how they are building sustainability and capacity from within by leveraging funding from their partners. And so, I'm sorry?
Funding and.
Yeah. And yes, which I was going to explain in just one second, that one of the things that we're looking at, I don't have these disaggregated at this point, but this is preliminary, but looking at how much the hubs have leveraged, looking at 5 of the cohort 1 hubs that we do have data at this time. These hubs have leveraged more than $3 million in funds across a variety of funding sources. That includes some state funding sources, almost $2 million in grants, direct partner support, 257 in-kind donations, and what we define in-kind donations as space, equipment, curriculum, supplies, computers, all of those kinds of things. And then volunteer time, which is actually quite a bit for these 122,000 in volunteer times. We're also looking at the same leverage funding from the cohort 2 hubs, but as you can imagine, they just started, so it's a little bit less, but also the same category. So that will be something that we will be working on preparing for the final report, which will come in the summer of 2017, is how they're building on that and where they can receive support in that. And then we'll be working on developing evidence-based recommendations, including those things up there. I know that we're almost done, and developing a dissemination plan.
Does your study protocol allow you to go back and get clarity, re-interview people, get things teased out a little bit more?
So we're doing interviews with, so there's one thing was the survey.
Yep.
And going back to individual in the survey, we couldn't do. But in order to get clarity of what these all mean, we actually conduct interviews with representative samples in each of the hubs.
And that will come in the final report, not in the interim report?
Yes. Okay. And we will be going back and talking with STEM Hub leaders again about just kind of the feasibility.
So part of the idea around the interim is we can call for legislative session if, there's a piece of that you use.
It also allows you to give us some feedback on what other information you may need. So one of the reasons to go through this exercise is that you think about, okay, well, they gave us a little bit of an introduction to this. What would I want to have?
So, yeah, well, this is going on with it. I do have one question. You don't need to answer now, but I'd like you to consider it, which is, there are a lot of different things going on out there related to that student and the community that's trying to serve that student. I worry about many different communities trying to, you got the RACs, you got the CT coordinators, you probably got ESDs out there. You got multiple communities all focused on the kid, and at some point is there rationalization and coordination of that effort in that community? And we don't need to address it here, but that's
In
something
many
that,
cases, they're the same person.
well, and that's great if they are, but if they all kind of work together, because we're trying to achieve a good outcome to the child, and that means they don't really want to see 4 different people coming at them. They want a holistic view of that. So
We're addressing that actually.
okay, good. So we don't need to get to it here, but I'd love to see that in the finance, because we want to be efficient. We want to be able to show the state that we're thinking about this holistically, not just, oh, we're STEM now, and now we're, RAC, or now we're CTE. It's really got to be a coordinated approach.
That was a very, very important.
Any last questions from the council before we move on? Thank you. This is great results. Obviously, this is very important work, and it's good to know that we are going down the right path. Obviously, much more to do in this area, but thank you for your work on this, and for the researcher who did all the work. Thank you. Excellent job.
Just make sure your name's on every paper. Make them take it off.
All right. Again, next agenda item is the STEM funders report, and Oracle funds is another good opportunity that leverages the work we've done, and sometimes better lucky than good when something shows up, and this looks like an opportunity that presents itself for the hubs, and I'm really excited about it. So Kyle, you want to kick it off? Or you want to have it? No?
Sure, I will start. Thank you. I'm Kyle Ricciuno with the Oregon Business Council, and we have an education program that we call Oregon Learns. So you'll see both of those names. Some people know it's the same, others don't. And this is Belle Cantor from the Oregon Community Foundation. So we are going to give you an update of a project that we will come together to really look at the role of private funders in CTE and STEM in the state. So we'll give you a good overview of that, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about the opportunities that we have been presented with the funds from Oracle, and then open up to questions. So you want to,
Sure.
next slide, please, Seth? Thank you.
I also wanted to recognize some of our other partners who are in the room who are working on this with us. There are folks here from Lemelson, PGE, and the Gray Family Foundation, who are other foundations that have been having these conversations with us. So they may jump in at some point with some questions. I'll take us back to the fall of 2015. OCF has been supporting, Oregon Community Foundation has been supporting CTE and STEM a lot over the years, but more on kind of one-off grants and one-off opportunities. And we're wanting to do something more specific and more intentional. We looked around, and there seemed to be this time in Oregon where the state was working to publish the STEM plan. There was a lot of private funder interest and investments. There was a lot going on legislatively and policymaker interest. And so it seemed to be that critical window to jump into and start to align folks. A lot of funders were doing a lot of private funders were doing their own investments, but they were doing them separately. And there was an interest to start working together, to collaborate, to be more cohesive in investments. The state was definitely investing, but their capacity to coordinate and innovate with the private funder field was limited. And then as a foundation, OCF, we looked at all of that. We looked at the strong impact that CTE and STEM education can have in students' lives. We invest heavily in education. Meant that we wanted to jump into this. So that fall, we made a grant to Oregon Learns with two main purposes. One was we had realized that this field needed this guiding document. And while there had been a lot of work done on developing the STEM strategic plan, there was a capacity needed to help finish that. I know that's now the STEM education plan. So we provided some funding to actually get that finished and get it out so that there was that document for the field. We also realized that there was a need for a clearer understanding among private funders of what was happening in the field and what the opportunities were for private funders to invest. And so we commissioned Oregon Learns to do the private funders report, which I believe is in your packet.
if you haven't seen it already. And that was looking at who was doing what the gaps were, and what we should be doing, what was kind of the roadmap going forward. In addition to producing that report, it came out late spring, early summer. Oregon Learns also hosted a report out to private funders and corporate funders. They invited 37 organizations, 21 were able to make it. There were many who were very interested in it, but just weren't able to be there. But it was pretty impressive to sit actually in a room here with that many private funders around the table really interested in what we could do as a group around CTE and STEM. I'm going to turn it back to Kyle to dig into the report.
And I will just add for that STEM funders convening that we had the first draft of our findings, and we did it in conjunction with the STEM Institute. You may remember that we had that last spring. So in May, when we brought them together, we also had the good fortune of having Ron Ottinger here. He was here for the STEM Institute, and he is one of the partners who's initially with, Noise, thank you, with Noise Foundation, and now he is with STEM Next. But he also came to talk to us in the capacity of the STEM Funders Network. So that's a national group of 20 funders, I believe. And we were able to learn from their experience of coming together to look at promising practices that they have around collaboration. So it was really interesting to hear the way that this group has been working together on big issues. And he reflected on some of the findings that we shared with him. So it was really a valuable conversation. We've continued to keep in touch with him. But to give you a sense of the scope of the report, first of all, I'll let you know that we hired Scott Nine, who is an education consultant here in Portland. And Scott did the interviews for us, and then we worked together to produce the report. But Scott interviewed 45 individuals. Many of them were here in Oregon. I think there were 5 or 6 national leaders who were also really gracious with their time and informed the process. And we looked across the board at all sectors, so really across the P20 continuum, if you will, education, industry, thought leaders, foundation leaders, some folks who weren't really directly tied to this, but our industry leaders, that sort of thing. We also looked at a huge number of documents. Scott was a very good sport because there is so much good stuff out there, and we kept surfacing good reports and good documents. And he went through all of those and did a qualitative data analysis, so he was able to look at all of it and code it for particular themes and words. We were interested in looking at private funders, which to us meant foundations, businesses, and corporate foundations. So really looking at that across the private funding sector. And we wanted to consider all the tools that they can bring to this. So financial, of course, but also look at research, convening, advocacy, relationship building, because we think that all of those roles are really important in terms of building this ecosystem. And as I said, importantly, we were looking across the P20 continuum, and we wanted to look at CTE and STEM. So in our attempt to sort of quantify the situation, and I will say something too, that we did this research last spring, and as I heard Martin say, this is really a snapshot in time. Things have grown, but I think much of what we learned in terms of the themes really are still very much accurate. But this is looking at the last biennium, and we estimated about $83.2 million in terms of the targeted state investment in CTE and STEM. So that included our $35 million package that we got in CTE and STEM. It includes some targeted investments in engineering education, the Talent Council, some other additional direct investments. It does not try to quantify all of the state staff and all of the state programs that are associated with CTE and STEM. We tried to just get a picture of those very direct targeted investments. On top of that, we were able to estimate that about $5.7 million is coming in direct private investments. And you can see the range of things that are currently being invested in. So the STEM hubs and hub-like efforts, which I think are RACs and other regional activities that are happening in the state. CTEC in Salem was certainly a very large private, public-private investment, about $3 million there in terms of establishing that school. But Oregon Connections and summer camps and robotics and out-of-school programs and the list goes on. And that's just a sort of sampling of the kinds of things that are being done. And I think it's really important to mention too that on top of this financial investment, we have a huge investment in terms of time and leadership, and that is going into things like the STEM Investment Council, CTE STEM Employer Coalition, all of the hubs, many activities in the RACs and direct investment in schools. So that's an effort that is hard to quantify, but really important. So in terms of, I'm really going to just report on two things, and then we'll talk about the broader context, and we'd love to invite your questions and discussion. But in terms of the needs and opportunities and the recommendations, those are the two things I'll focus on. The needs and opportunities will come as probably no surprise. Many of you in this room were interviewed for this report. But there are a couple of key things that emerged. First of all, everyone across the board felt that this really was the time to make this happen in terms of the state priority, the development of the hubs, state investment. It really was the time to look at moving forward in a strategic way for private funders to come together. So there was a strong call for funders and employers to lead and also to learn, so to work as partners to figure out the best ways to do this work and to learn from those practitioners doing this work about how we can best support them and contribute. Identifying and nurturing innovation was identified over and over as a key area where the private funds can really support that. I think there was the sense that we should be informed and guided by the STEM education plan and by the direction of the state, but private funders have an opportunity to look at it in a way that take a little bit more risk and focus on innovation. You play a unique role in that respect. There was a sense that in terms of the hubs, private funding would be a really important, play an important role in helping the hubs become this public-private partnership as opposed to a government program, which we can talk about whether they are ever conceived that way. But the funders thought that their involvement, the tools they bring to this ecosystem could really be helpful in terms of helping those hubs grow into that partnership. Out of school time was another area that surfaced because that is an area I think most naturally where private funding can go to community-based organizations, nonprofit organizations, and others. And so that was an area to, and also including family and community in that piece. We thought that would be, or the respondents saw that as an area where they could play an important role, and that it was a very big need in this ecosystem, figuring out how can we best move the out-of-schools goals forward. The data, the networking tools, we talked about that today. It was very exciting to see how far we've come. Everyone across the board agreed that that was so important to understand where we were heading and how well we were doing and where were the areas where we needed to improve. So that was a very important part. The public narrative and communications has had long been a priority. We have a lot of work to do in just helping Oregonians understand CTE and STEM and applied learning and how it fits in. All of the themes that are so near and dear to our heart, we have a lot of work to do to help Oregonians understand that. Parents, students, lawmakers, etc. And then I think supporting educators and administrators, helping them really be STEM literate. In particular, this was a leadership issue. We heard from many educators that they would love help in sort of funding that leadership development, help people understand what are the good practices, what's the culture and the practice within the school that nurtures CTE and STEM, all those range of leadership issues. And then people encouraged us to really look forward, to always be looking out as opposed to focusing on what's happening right now, but that private funders could keep that forward-looking perspective. And there were three sort of system-wide needs that came up over and over, and again, these will be no surprise. One around resources and coordination. We talked a little bit about that just in the last conversation. The other around the shortage of skilled educators, and that came up over and over in many different ways. And then finally, the issue of equity across the system. We talked about this. So in terms of the recommendations, there were 7 key recommendations that emerged from the report, and they really very much mirrored the needs that I outlined. But foremost, supporting, well, and these really are not in any, I guess we reordered them. We did, okay. So we had the 7 recommendations that came out. Our STEM funder group has met several times since, and we've placed them in a bit of an order just in terms of how, especially the first 3. The others are not really ordered. But the idea is, first and foremost, we think we can play a role in supporting out-of-school programs. This is an area that has great promise, as you well know, to really reach students and help that STEM identity, transfer the skills, and really encourage them. We think private funders, there's a clear role there, and so that has emerged as one of our top priorities and an area where we think that we can play a key role. Growing the ranks of educators, both teachers and administrators, adept in CTE and STEM teaching, and this is an area that I think is universal across the whole P20, and so I think that that's you'll find that that's an area where funders are especially interested, and we've heard this over and over across the board. And I think that early childhood, we talked a little bit about that. This came up in the most surprising ways from many different people. And so I think it wasn't just the early educators who raised this as an issue. You know, when you think about identifying or helping students with that STEM identity and nurturing their creativity and their curiosity, all that begins early. And I think there was also the realization that though we don't call it CTE or STEM, much of what they're doing in that early education really is highly correlates with the kinds of students and learners that we're after. So early childhood came up over and over. Again, the fourth one is really this idea of trying to look at some of these public and private models that have emerged around the state. So Treasure Valley in Eastern Oregon, CTEC down in Salem, these are really wonderful examples of the ways that public and private resources and organizations can come together. Those happen to be a couple of examples, but there are all sorts of ways we can look at that model and adapt that and really connect students to the workplace. There was a lot, we heard from a lot of folks around the issue of quality. How do we measure it? How do we know what it looks like? How can we work together for continuous improvement? And so that's really that next bullet. There was a need or a desire, I guess, to just always know that we're working on the right program, that the quality is there, and that we are all working together to continually improve. Nurturing the STEM ecosystems was a very high goal. I think it is an area that Oregon has recognized nationally. We've got this emerging system. The STEM hubs are really growing into that role across the state to really help be the place that pulls this all together. And certainly the private funding can support that. I think we probably see this lower on the list only because the private funder dollars will always be a tiny fraction compared to what the public dollars would be. And so I think there are very strategic and targeted ways that we can support the STEM hubs and really nurture them as an ecosystem. And then finally, the communication goal is really critical. And one of the ways we've talked about it in our advisory group is the idea of a major communications plan to all of Oregon around CTE and STEM is a little daunting. So we have thought about maybe there are important ways we can weave communications into the priorities.
So think about how we better communicate to families and communities in the out of school space. Or how can we better communicate around the needs of educators and the skill shortages, and weave those themes in through there. We haven't fully developed that yet, but that's really where we're going in terms of our thinking.
So as we've been telling the story that we've had this kind of group of private funders coming together around this. Within that, and I mentioned the folks who are part of that, we have started to develop some kind of ways that we're looking at this, some tenements, if you will. Always looking within the opportunity gaps of low-income students, students of color, rural students, and girls. Making sure we're really statewide, looking at the needs across the state, going different across the state, being clear that what we're looking for is aligned or partnered funding so that we can support each other, and making sure that it's a good role for private dollars, so that we're not replacing state money, but we're pushing it or complementing it, or we're working together but not replacing those dollars. We have started on a couple things already together. One is a project with the Oregon Coast STEM Hub around using invention-based education to help teachers bring innovative and national NGSS line approaches into their classroom. We're just starting that project, and there's several funders working on that together. And then we are also meeting, as we mentioned, to make some investments later this year. So really doing some planning and looking forward around that. I'm talking fast because of the 5 minutes. So in the middle of all of this, last September, OCS received a phone call from the governor's office announcing that the Cover Oregon settlement had happened, and that Oracle would be sending OCF $10 million to help advance STEM education in the state. It was a wonderful phone call to get. We do.
No, I don't want it. Never mind.
We did learn about it 20 minutes before the press release went out, so it was quick. We have gotten settlements before. The size of OCF, the ability to manage that size of money, being the type of organization we are, if there's contentious groups. So we've received those before. It'll be $10 million overall. $5 million is coming this July, $5 million in next June, so we don't have the money yet. There was very little within the settlement agreement that defines us on how to use the funding, other than working through the STEM hubs. That was the only piece of it. So and those are the pieces for the Oracle funding. We are using this and folding it into our partnership with the other funders that we've been talking about. So this is folding into that planning. And we're hoping to be able to start to get some of that funding out the second half of this year.
So explain to me the mechanism and the requirement around the hubs. So are they going to, hubs apply for the money, get the money, and then they distribute what they think, where the grant they come up with, or you are just?
We don't know completely yet. Yeah. We're very early in our conversation, our thinking about this. This was money that was donated to the Oregon Community Foundation, so our board is overseeing it. Okay. And it could look like a lot of different things. It could be that we make a targeted grant to particular hubs to do some internal work themselves. It could be that we work with them to do a re-granting program. It could be that we have a competitive process with the hubs. It could be that we don't have a competitive process with the hubs.
But a hub's got to be involved.
The hubs have got to be involved.
Most of them aren't set up structurally to be able to do the granting themselves or be able to hand out dollars in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
But they can run programs and they can deliver to the communities.
Mm-hmm. And we're having distributed through the STEM hubs. I think whoever wrote the settlement didn't think too deeply about that, but I mean, yes, if they wanted us to work with the STEM hubs, but exactly the wording.
The through is difficult because it relies on contracting.
Right, well, and it could be distributed to them, so it could be for their own work through them. So we're interpreting that and that we need to, our grantee needs to be the STEM hub. How we do that is completely up to OCF.
I mean, the obvious thing is that there's an investment thing around it. So it has me wondering what the relationship between you and us would be, and how we can best collaborate. I mean, you see that we've got all this activity going around these type of structures and services that we're still figuring out the best way to provide the investments they need. So, you know, I'm a systems person. I'm always trying to not reinvent the wheel. So I'm looking to you folks to help tell us what type of relationship we might have, if we have a relationship. Should we just get out of the way and let you work the STEM hub? What, I mean, has that discussion come up in your?
It's come up to a degree. I think we will also need some direction from you on how to be involved. We are relying a lot on the STEM education plan to provide a lot of knowledge. This funder group, Mark has joined us. And so we're getting knowledge and expertise from him on the focus and areas for you all. We are starting some conversations with the STEM hubs directly to find out where their priorities are, where their challenges are, where there may be some opportunities to advance these areas. But we also want to have as big a tent as possible. So if there are folks here or folks you know that should be involved who are industry, who are other funders, who are community partners who would be able to contribute to this, then we welcome them.
Any other questions from council members? Well, it's an exciting opportunity for the state, for you. It is a chance to grow our programs, the ones that have shown promise and success. I would say thank you so much to OCF for helping us fund the STEM education plan and getting that work completed. It's a great plan, and without your assistance and financial support, we wouldn't have got that done. Your work on this funders, work with the foundations and the funders is really a good piece of work. Continue to think about how we make that process seamless and make it easy so that people needing money don't have to go through 10 different hoops. So more of the foundations can align around a process in a way to make it easy for the hubs and others to access those dollars would be great. So great piece of work. So thank you so much, and we'll just keep connected. Thank you.
Do you have time for a 5-minute?
Yeah, sure. Let's take a 5-minute stretch. We're a little bit behind. We're going to check on schedule here, but I think we can do. Let's take a 5-minute stretch break.
Yes.
Okay, let's go ahead and get Okay, before we get to the next agenda item is around business and industry action. Part of the STEM education plan has a role for business to continue to further some of the objectives in the education plan. I see the STEM Employer Coalition, CTE STEM Employer Coalition as a vehicle to make that happen. We will try to put a report out, and we are working with the CTE STEM Employer Coalition on how we move it forward on the business side. So we'll table this for now, but we'll bring a report back from the CTE STEM Employer Coalition, which I'm co-chair of, so it's kind of like talking to myself, but I really do want to inform the council of what we're doing there and how we move this forward. So
The flyer?
for now, so we can get a little bit back up on schedule. So the next item is Computer Science and Digital Literacy Grant, and that's obviously a very important grant that we put out. This is a very important field to our community and to our economy. So we have, we'd like you to do this in about.
That is.
Could you shorten the code on this?
My students actually want that to happen too, so you can dream, Mark, on that. No, folks, in your packet, you'll find a fact sheet, and if you really have a problem with sleeping tonight, go ahead and dig that up. I'm going to leave that as it is. We'll move to the PowerPoint, and I'm going to take a moment to admire the problem. All right, that's enough time. You know, we already know why we're here. Our research shows that 20% of the high schools, that 66 out of 325 have a coding class or more, and we think that's pathetic. But we are a pile of engineering and computer science teachers. Now, sorry about the metaphor and the image, but let's just extend that a bit and say that if we laid all the computer science and engineering teachers in Oregon end to end from here, that last person could be cheering at the whatever is going on over there across the street. Really, there's not very many of us. And so that, but the organization, Oregon Computer Science Teacher Association, is an organization of professional, and we're going to term that, we say educators now because, as you had heard earlier, there are more than just certified teachers that happen to be involved in computer science and engineering education. So we are a group of educators training ourselves, but we also have been working in some part of this introduction that Jim made was the Oregon Computer Science Teacher Association and the Digital Literacy Grant. So we're going to combine the two, but there are some separations. For example, the Digital Literacy Grant that we received last April required us to focus on 7th through 12th grade. We looked around at ourselves, and let me introduce who we're looking around at. Kathy Zettel-Schaefer is our Executive Director of Oregon Computer Science Teacher Association. John Niebergall is our mobile PD and engineering kind of focus. Don Domes, financial oversight and robotics. We can go down like that. You are all partners in crime here. Well, you're partners. I'm not sure what your crime record is. I didn't check it this morning. But Denise Brock from ODE works with us. Jim Hook from PSU. And so if you have specific questions, in fact, I'm not modeling good teaching strategies right now because I'm talking at you, and I need this to be a conversation versus just me dialoguing. My students know that if they don't interrupt me with a question, I may never stop.
Quite noted.
Next slide.
He gets that, and he's going. That's why it went from here to here. So anyway, this is who we are. The question, and I'm gonna. There could be a name here. John Tortorici, who Jim knows and many of us do, is one of our leaders as well, made this comment a few months ago as he was looking at us. He represents our industry partners, and he looked at us and what we have done, and he said, you know what, this is what we're doing. We're not only moving the needle for the K-12, the high-tech education in Oregon, but we're changing the face of the dial. And the definition, the meaning of that is we're not only just increasing the status quo, we're looking at opportunities to really change what is going on because we represent the heart of STEM, the technology and the engineering. We are the heart of STEM, and we are the teachers and educators in the trenches that are changing the heart of STEM for our students in Oregon. So that's who we are. We're very passionate about what we're doing, and we have some big dreams about it. And we have a lot of partners. And so we were kind of talking about, okay, did we get everybody? No, we probably still have some out there. And I'm going to speak to one, and that's the TEALS organization, which Microsoft is providing engineers to schools who don't have teachers in computer science to partner with optimistic, good educators to deliver a high-tech curriculum in the schools. And so we're very happy to partner with TEALS. We'll get the next time I do this, TEALS will be there. If you go on to the initiatives and programs that we have, these are the things that we're doing. Some of them deal with who we've always been as teachers training teachers. Many of these, though, have become new initiatives as a result of the digital literacy grant. As you look to the third to the bottom, we are a K-12 organization, but our grant has restricted the funding to 7 through 12. The problem that I was going to talk about was most middle schools have 6th grade, so we've had to, it's been a little bit awkward to try to narrow that funding down, but we've been able to, we are reaching the K-12 education system throughout Oregon, and that's, as you can see here, I'm not going to go through all of these, but this is who we are. The mission is here, but the mission is, this could be the STEM Council's mission. This could be many organizations. As you look at that list, a few pages before where we are here, many of those organizations could adopt this. We could all have this mission of improving opportunities for our students in Oregon. But I do want to emphasize, and I've heard Eric Meslow say this over and over and over, it's about high pay, high demand career opportunities for our students. What we are doing, we've planned, we have an opportunity to really reach the state of Oregon. And as you can see here, these are dates that are locked down. This is what we will be doing this summer and more. There may be other dates and locations as they come available, and we have requests for them. You're not asking any questions yet, so I'm just going to keep on going. You just need to interrupt. But one of the significant things that we haven't done that we are doing as a result of the grant is the PLCs, professional learning communities. As you see there, they're curriculum specific, but they are, and if we were to dig into the individuals that are in these, it's statewide. In fact, one of mine is in Adrian, Oregon. So anybody know where Adrian is? It's about as far away from here east as possible and still have an Oregon zip code. So, we do have people that we're reaching out all the way to the east side of Oregon and south as well. So we're very excited about this because these folks will be involved in growing programs in their region. They're going to become better at the curriculum they're delivering and the teaching that they're doing for education, maybe their after-school programs.
whatever the case is, we're going to be connecting with them, and many of them have all, these PLCs, as you see by the dates, have already met. Some are yet to meet, and we'll be connecting with them, and hopefully long term, but certainly through the summer with this group. Yes.
Are you integrating with the hubs in terms of trying to push this into the communities, or are you trying to do this on your own?
Okay, so we can't do this on our own. If you go back to our partners, we listed as many hubs. Mark keeps adding hubs. The problem is I just, I'm
sorry, I asked the question.
Right, it's all built, it's nice, and then Mark adds the hubs. Isn't that cool? But yeah, no, we're partnering with hubs. And when you see that hubs have a significant effort towards professional development, in some cases, we're walking in and saying, you know, we will be your PD for T&E, or the technology and the engineering side. So we can do that. And then ESDs as well. So we're working with the regional CTE coordinators when we go in with the SuperQuest professional development. They're helping our communication. And if I can, that was a pause for somebody to ask a question. You know, Batman is one of my favorite superheroes. And so what we can do in the case of Batman is think about when somebody needs Batman, what happens? You see this image that's projected into the sky. And so that is a model for our pop-up SuperQuest. So you saw the scripted SuperQuest 3-day training in and around Oregon. But what happens if Park Rose High School says, you know what, we want 4 or 5 teachers to learn how to this exploring computer science curriculum, then up comes, it's not Batman, we'll create our own symbol, but 5 minutes? You want 5 symbols, you want 5 minutes. So as it turns out, we will do a pop-up SuperQuest for the needs of the specific building, when they can do it, we have the trainers and we'll go there. So that slide's about the protocols for the pop-up SuperQuest. CS for All, we're adopting the federal CS for All phrase, name, brand, whatever you want, and so we're doing that. We're having a kickoff, and if I don't get you invited, you're invited now because you're here and I'm talking. It is February 8th, the OEA headquarters at 5:30. I am buying adult beverages for everyone. And then we're talking to you about our vision for the future. Can I say that on this?
No, great.
It's recorded now.
No. Didn't I say I? That's my name to change. Okay. So we're down to 4 minutes, but you can see there, ECS, one of the curriculums that we're certainly promoting is, and nationally as well, Joanna Good is the developer of the Exploring Computer Science. She's out of the University of Oregon. The one thing that we're really excited about is what the grant has allowed us to do. On the next slide, you'll see the state of Oregon and the regions, and they roughly are synonymous with the hubs that happen to be out there. And you can see some names associated with regions. What we are doing is we're identifying individuals in those areas to be our eyes and our feet on the ground, to be able to feed us information, to correct information, to promote with the administrators and school boards and ESDs, and we're calling them regional computer science coordinators, and that will really solidify our reach throughout the state of Oregon. The return on investment for what we've done happens to be listed on the next slide, and it's very clear that we have a significant reach. We've been doing a ton of stuff. As you see on the last 3 bullet items, they are the respondents to our workshop when we do surveys, very, very positive about what we're doing and how we're helping them become better versions of themselves in those regions. There are a number of obstacles, and I want to you can read those again, but down at the bottom is a research that shows 90% of parents believe that computer science education is a good use of resources, while only 8% of administrators believe that parents want CS education in for their kid, which is a strange disconnect. That's an obstacle. There are others, and you can read them. Let's go to the next slide. what's our future? We are training the educators. We're trying to influence the influencers. We are basically building the structure, and then we have the regional CS coordinators in place. And next slide, please. So we are doing the work, but we've been building the plane as we fly it, but it's in the air. Then now what? So that's basically a conclusion, except that I'm not done. Measure 98 is an interesting, throws an interesting wrench into this thing. And it is some opportunities for us, for everyone actually. Career path funding, I've received some career path funding. It's been great. It's really helped my program and it's helped many others. But then notice that the last bullet is the same as the obstacle bullet, because it's an opportunity.
What is the status of the grant when you run out of money?
Well, I think that ODE won't give us any more unless we get another grant.
Yes,
but
exactly.
Maybe just out of the goodness of their heart, they'll go ahead and say, you know. No,
July 1st is the grant complete?
Correct.
Correct. And then is there, where do you find your money after July 1st? Are we refreshing this grant as part of our STEM investment portfolio for the next biennium, or are we concluded with this?
And the conversation that we, with this council of the Department of Education and the Higher Education Coordination Commission have.
Okay. And it was roughly how much, $500,000?
750,000, and yes, done in July 1. And yeah, so the infrastructure that we built, you know, Kathy says we've built the building, and now how we're going to keep the lights on and keep the momentum going. So that, as a professional teacher organization, sustainability is a strange concept, because we don't have any inherent funding. Right. So therefore, sustainability, you know, that's the big question mark. And yeah.
So Mark, where does that conversation need to occur? Is it primarily at this council level, or is it within ODE that this conversation needs to occur?
Currently working with the Department of Education, some conversations with them is to bring forward the results of our current investments and to engage the council in conversation about prioritization of those current investments vis-a-vis the STEM education plan and some of the recommendations that were there. Sure. To set priorities and.
So the timeline associated with that has to be almost immediately, because otherwise we're going to have employees out there that are going to start jumping ship because they don't see whether or not they've got money coming July 2nd.
Yeah, this is the ongoing challenge of biennial funding.
Right. No, I understand. Are we going to make that recommendation? We need to put this up for discussion to see if anybody salutes. We got to raise this thing up the flagpole.
Yeah, I think with our March and April conversations, we need to be doing that.
What is the temperature within ODE already? I mean, you guys in the group are all teachers. Are you getting good feedback and support within the agency already? So it's not like we're going to run this up the flagpole and we already know there's opposition. I mean, are you feeling like?
And that's a great question. I know that Denise has been staying very close to us as an employee of ODE, coming to our meetings and being a member of our oversight committee and staying close to us in a lot of different ways. And she knows this is very, you know, we could have her chat about that, and we've received positive feedback from anyone that's been close to us in the work we've done.
Okay.
The computer science, and there was a report just released yesterday, actually, from the Department of Labor, re-emphasizing the need for computer science in the country. That particular study left out the healthcare industries, unfortunately. Again. You know, so anyway, in regards to that, computer science continues to be a major need in the state of Oregon, and so emphasizing that and prioritizing that from a workforce and an economic development, I think is critical. There's also federal opportunities for the CS for All movement, that there's conversations happening in terms of partnerships with the post-secondary institutions. Did you want to
Sure.
comment?
So there's the Computer Science for All solicitation from the National Science Foundation that's looking for looking to fund research practitioner partnerships to look at either high school or K-8 computer science education opportunities. I'm Jim Hook at Portland State. I'm collaborating with Joanna Good at the University of Oregon to do a high school level proposal that will try and leverage a lot of the infrastructure that's been built under this ODE award in order to use scaling up the NSF-sponsored curricula as a laboratory for some of the problems of practice of scaling up in the nation. That's the thesis of the proposal in a word. The other grant that I expect to be coordinated with this and solicited is going to come from Yoon Tran at George Fox University. And she has been in the third grade classroom in Newburgh and Dayton and working with populations with very high, with bilingual classrooms and very high numbers of English language learners and other learners requiring adaptation, and has rotated an entire school's third grade class through this curriculum with a pre-service teacher, a computer science student, and an in-service teacher all in the same room. I'm very excited about having connected with her. So I think what we will see is one proposal in that space looking at how do we have adaptable earlier, primary school education, and then another one looking at how we scale up, how we leverage some of this infrastructure. But the challenge, as Terrell alluded to in the opening, is we don't have enough in-service teachers. We don't have a story for how to make pre-service teachers. And some of these curricula can be delivered effectively by non-specialists, and some of the curricula require specialists.
Yes, I'm being super practical about this in the sense that if we've started something, if it's got value, how are we going to coordinate with those individuals over this next 6 months so they feel like we're working together for an end result that's positive? We have a legislative session that's starting right now. It's great if the Computer Science Teachers Association is down there lobbying, but we need them lobbying on the same piece of paper that we're all lobbying from CT STEM and from this organization. And my concern is if we're waiting till April or May to be able to clarify the situation, that leaves a lot of time for sausage to be made in not a coordinated manner.
So let's put this to the very end.
I think we owe answers sooner than later.
So if I could just wrap up one thing on I blew by the slide on the stories that are meaningful. Newburgh High School, Law High School, Lake Oswego, they're schools that you know. And my son in Newburgh High School did not have an opportunity for computer science, went to the University of Oregon, got a degree in computer science, but it was because of the home and because of my influence. There was nothing at Newburgh High School. Recently, though, a teacher got the dream, and I'm working with him, and they have a program now. Aloha High School, an industry person came out, retired, said, I have a passion for that high school and that community, and got certified, and now has a program. Lake Oswego is a math teacher who had the same, I'm sorry about the camera, but the math teacher, Dan, and the administrator, Will, added that program in. So those are schools we know where programs are being added. So there's momentum and there's work happening. Thank you for giving us a chance.
Thank you so much.
And as you think about Measure 98 and what's going to happen, the more you can make these programs easily attainable and accessible to high school, better off so they can quickly on that if they get dollars. Okay, we're going to move on just because we've got a short list of time. The next one is Report On from Lane STEM Hub, a new hub, and Heidi's here to talk about it.
She's actually on the phone.
We're here. This is Heidi. Can you hear us? Hear me?
Hi, Heidi, I'm going to give you control as presenter. Is that all right?
That sounds great. Let's see.
Okay, Heidi, go ahead and introduce yourself and let's go ahead and get started.
Hold on just a sec. we're having some difficulties. Just a second here.
I can't, she looks like she almost has it here. If you want to share your screen, Heidi, once you have your thing up.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Perfect.
Does Lane STEM? Okay. Great. So it's actually, so Heidi Larwick and Aaron Maloney. And together we direct and coordinate the work of Lane STEM as well as Connected Lane County, which is our RAC. And today we just want to share with you a little bit, give you kind of the landscape of Lane County stage for why we're doing what we're doing, talk a little bit about the programming grant and some of our hopes for 2017. And so if there's questions, we can't see you. We can't see you. Yeah.
Okay, keep going. We'll interject ourselves as necessary.
All right. Okay, so a little bit about Lane County. So we currently have 45,000 students in K-12 across 16 school districts. 3 of those school districts are in the metro area, and then the remaining 13 are defined as rural. In some of the, well, across Lane County, more than half of our kids are receiving free and reduced lunch, and in some of the rural areas that goes up to 70%. When we look at our math and science scores from 5th and 8th graders, you'll see on the screen that we have quite a few students who are not meeting the grade level expectations. When we talk about computer science, because we've been talking about that a lot today, fewer than half of our high schools, so we have 29 high schools, fewer than half have any computer science course offerings. We have 1 CTE in information technology at one of our alternative high schools, or credit recovery high schools, sorry, and 1 AP course that's in progress. So clearly there's a lot of opportunity for us here. And then when we talk about some of the under-resourced areas, so just when we talk about funding, our rural areas have reduced staffing, they don't have the funding for equipment, and they're seeing huge needs in professional development. Then when we shift to talk about our economy, so if we look at just sort of the three highest growth sectors in our county, it's technology, manufacturing, and healthcare, which I'm sure is not a surprise to most of the folks. We have over 3,000 companies that employ 46,000 people, and when we look at kind of the projections in the next 8 to 10 years, we're going to see huge growth, especially in the tech sector, which is expected to grow by about 28%. We include the average wage here of $53,000 because when you take you back to the education piece, and we have families that are living in poverty, for a family of 4, that's defined as $41,000. So when we look at the average wage of these industries at 53, we see a real opportunity to elevate our students and families out of poverty. And then the final piece is that we look across all 3 of these sectors, and there are openings for high school graduates with the right skills, jobs for folks who complete certificates at the local community college, Lane Community College, and jobs for 4-year graduates from the U of O.
Or other institutions.
Or other institutions, yes. Yes, other let's see. So this is just, I wanted to kind of show you who's at the table for Lane STEM when we're kind of looking at this data, when we're talking about the need. So you can really see that it's a collaborative effort from our K-12, post-secondary, industry, and formal educators. We feel really proud that these people are continually coming to the table to inform the direction and to give their insight and guidance on kind of where we should go and who we should be. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are just some of the key people that I thought would be great to share with you. So here's some of the goals and the outcomes as we think about that today. We're really interested in engaging students in all things STEM. We want them to know pathways to STEM careers. Definitely want to increase our educator capacity We want to make sure it's accessible. We want to strengthen that connection between school and career, and we'll talk about that a little bit with our programming grant. And then when we talk about outcomes, you know, everybody's got their eye on next generation science standards, and so we want our county to be ready to implement that successfully. We want there to be a central point of communication so it's easy, families know where to access STEM activities. We want to see our math and science scores improve, and we want to see our students graduate and be successful in securing employment in these growing STEM and STEAM fields. Okay, so when we talk about our strategies, so the first strategy that we've identified here is to implement a stronger, more coordinated school-to-work system. Now this is a priority of both Connected Lane County and Lane STEM, and so we're able to work together on moving this forward. One of the things that we'll be doing this year, so this spring, we'll be piloting a program. So just to give you a brief background, so most high schools do this individually. And even in districts that may have 6 high schools, they still do it individually. And so we hear a lot from educators, counselors, they're competing to get experiences for their kids, or we have industry partners that say, I never get asked. And so what we're trying to do is kind of create that centralized system so that educators have one point, industry has one point, and you know, we were able to distribute our students across the county and make sure that they get these experiences. So in the spring, we're piloting with our tech companies, and we're really fortunate to have a partnership with Technology Association of Oregon, Lunar Logic, and Weight Trainer, who have been kind of the key 3 in this development. But we will be working across the system to identify students who are interested in internships, job shadows, and group site visits. We're going to launch something called Experience Oregon Tech, which buses groups of students to downtown Eugene, gives them the opportunity to walk through a door of a tech company to see what that looks like. And so far we have 25 companies that have said yes to one or more of those options. So it's looking like we'll have about 11 sites for internships. Job shadows is about 23, and then all have said yes, all 25 have said yes, they would take groups of students to tour their facilities. Then following that, so we want to give students the experiences, but if we get them excited about computer science and we don't have the curriculum to combine with it, then there's an opportunity. So we are looking to build our educator capacity. So remember on the first slide, we have one CTE program, less than half have computer science of any kind, and one school is in progress in developing an AP course. So one of the things is that we're realizing is that educators are excited and they want to do it, but they're not quite sure what that looks like. And so we are going to place 13 educators into summer paid externships or internships, so that they can really understand, so they can take the tools back to their classroom. It's looking like about 10 of them will go to tech companies, 5 to manufacturing, 10 to tech companies, 2 to manufacturing, and 1 to health occupations. We have 18 tech companies that have said yes, 5 manufacturing, and we're working on the healthcare piece. The outcomes of the summer will include at a minimum 4 high schools creating new CTE programs in information technology. Some of the schools will be looking at evolving or developing new CS curriculum, and a couple of the teachers will be looking at how to build lessons into their math and science classes that are focused on tech.
Heidi, could you advance the slides?
Pardon me?
Oh, great, we're on that now.
And I'm sorry, this is Thompson. So how are you coordinating as you begin this rollout with OCESTA and their resources?
Well, we've been a part of the playbook conversations, and you know, we're careful not to. We're looking at all the different professional development opportunities, so the internships will not conflict with the timing of those. Is that what you mean?
Well, it's a matter of leveraging the resources that already are in place, and being able to coordinate to take advantage of all that Terrell and his team are pulling together. So to focus that within Lane County, but leverage those statewide resources.
So this is Jim Hook.
Yeah, I guess.
I'm part of the playbook effort. It's actually part of the OCSTA award. Jill Hubbard is leading that at Tualatin High School as part of this sort of statewide network. So we have actually actively been coordinating with Heidi and the team at Lane.
Wonderful.
Okay, keep going, Heidi.
So next strategy is to increase access to STEM education, content, and resources. So a few of things we'll be doing this year. We're building, I guess I should go in order. We're building a resource directory. So our local arts council, Lane Arts Council, built one within the last year that identified arts opportunities in schools and out of schools. And so we're going to be adding to it the S, the T, the E, and the M. And we're working on that right now. So it'll be a resource for families. It'll be a resource for educators to see what's happening across the county. And it will also open our eyes to where the pockets of need truly are so that we can focus a little bit more on those areas. And then this summer, we'll be working with the Oregon Science Teachers Association to host a professional development for K-5 teachers in all 16 districts, with the hope being that the professional development will be to guide those teachers and administrators on how to roll out NGSS, or Next Generation Science Standards, in their respective districts. And then we will commit, so the Lane ESD, we have a science specialist, which could be a STEM specialist next year. We're not quite sure what that looks like, but the ESD has committed that person to supporting these teachers throughout the year, beyond the life of the grant. Any questions? Okay. So just a couple of things, some successes since we've been on board, which has been less than 6 months, but I still feel pretty accomplished in what we've done. So we did get the programming grant. We do have a couple other applications out there to state foundations. I feel like we have taken a really good, we've taken some time to really look at the systems change rather than some of the short-term wins. So what we're trying to build and what we're trying to do is going to create a more impactful system in the long term. And then, as we all know, collaboration is hard, but you saw people at the table, and like I mentioned earlier, we just feel very grateful for their contribution and their guidance in all of this work. So in addition to what we're doing with the programming grant, we also have hopes beyond that. So we're looking at the School to Work program. So the pilot with the tech companies, that's just the starting point. We hope that will slowly grow so that it's every industry and every student. We won't, so that everybody has access to it and students can get the experiences that they're looking for. We're going to be hosting, in conjunction with Connected Lane County, a career fair this October. We don't have a countywide one, and so this will be kind of our first attempt at that. And then another piece is that we're looking at how to launch countywide coding clubs. So what kind of support can Lane STEM and Connected Lane County provide, and giving the professional development and the resources to schools so that they can implement them successfully. And we're partnering with Coder Dojo on that initiative. And then we talk about educator capacity. So at the end of the summer, we will have likely 4 PTE programs of study, and all teachers or all educators have agreed to share those across the county, which is a great step, and so that other schools can kind of see what that could look like. We also hope to formalize more the connections between industry and local schools. So we're looking at some models about industry providing lessons in K-5 and after-school family events. And then the final piece is that there's a movement to kind of regionalize our advisory boards. So high schools that have CTE programs have their own advisory boards, and we're working with the CTE regional coordinator here to figure out how we might regionalize that and create more efficiency so that every school has access to the experts in the field, and we're all doing the same thing. So I think that's all we have for today. If there's any questions, we're happy to field them.
Any questions from the council? Heidi, you're doing a fabulous job, doing all the right things, creating the conversations. Really appreciate your leadership down in Wayne County, and it sounds like you're starting to make a difference. I know you're a relatively new hub, but a lot of great progress and successes to show here.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on. These are always good stories. Again, this is another reason why we want Measure 98 programs to be coordinated through the hub. They're doing all the right things. They're thinking about programs. This is, again, a natural connection, and they should be connected. So we have two public testimony requests. So we'll do the first one. I think Joanne McQueen.
Sean.
Sean.
It's yeah, you're right. It's C-H-A-U-N. That's correct. You saw that.
It looks like an L. That's why I should.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I'm Sean McQueen, the Director of Solar for our schools at Bonneville Environmental Foundation. And so I have been following the STEM Investment Council and the Oregon Education Investment Board. It reminds me of watershed councils. I was excited to see that came up in the research. I did watershed work back in the day. Anyhow, I'm here because I'm also the chair of the Workforce Development Committee for Portland, Oregon Women in Energy and Renewables, and it's a new group, as well as on the Education Committee for the Oregon Solar Energy Industry Association. So I'm with you, I have a hard time talking to people behind me. It's really driving me nuts, sorry. But anyway, I'm here because I'm working also with Energy Trust of Oregon, Solar Oregon, and OSEA to figure out how to complete the clean energy career pipeline in Oregon particularly, but everywhere in the country. So our program provides teacher leadership development, science kids, all that, teacher training. There's lots of projects. You can go on our website and see that. But specifically in this meeting, when I saw this agenda and I'm just down the street, I just wanted to point out that we, want to get involved. Our program is naturally involved. It's funny to hear the STEM CTE thing when literally, as we've updated our program logic model and theory of change, we've also pointed this out as becoming part of groups where I work with schools, work with industry, utility, solar, wind, you name it. And then, this whole thing is evolving together. So I just am here to say that we want to get at the table, at the right table. The solar industry is really excited about the legislative changes in Oregon where our renewable portfolio is going to be 50% renewable by 2035. Thank you. PGE was a PGE actually, it's really amazing if you have utilities that have a lot of regulation who actually get involved in something like that. It's pretty cool. So there's a lot of opportunity. Those opportunities don't extend to the rural parts of Oregon that we notice that solar companies are fishing for people in Portland to go to Eastern Oregon to install solar, and then they don't live there. So we would love companies to look at the local community and see talent. How are they going to see talent if we don't support the development of teachers? So I have my cards. I want to get at the right table. I'm right here, right now. So.
Well, the number. Oh, go ahead.
I was like, Sean, obviously connected with the hub.
Yes.
Yeah, we've been doing that.
And the hub symposium would be our STEM symposium. February 22nd would be another opportunity for you to show up and talk about what you might have to offer.
And why it's still in existence, have you reached out to the Oregon Talent Council?
Oregon
Talent Council?
Actually, I'm not aware of that.
Okay, the Oregon Talent Council is responsible for kind of taking our work through the post-secondary piece, identifying industries that need talent and investing in that. And they have an energy sector. Yeah. Now, they're likely not to be around in 2017, 2018, but at the same time, the plan, which agencies use to establish goals, is going to continue, and we'll have an energy section in it. So I highly suggest you touch base with them.
Can you say that name again?
Oregon Talent Council.
All right.
Catch you after the meeting. Thank you for the comments and thanks for working with you. We've got a great partnership with you on solar on schools and things like that. Okay, next person is Kristen Harrison.
Hi, just one more pitch for February 22nd, and also, I wasn't sure I was gonna make it on the agenda, so I jotted my name onto that. Also, I actually have a clarifying question around leveraged funds. What's appealing? Would we be looking to the beginning of the current biennium, or the beginning of hub status, so for us, 2 biennia ago, or the beginning of hub development, which would be 2011 for us. So data collection around that is more challenging, but really want to know what data is good for you guys around funds that have been dedicated from other sources to this work.
So the February 22nd, is that similar to what you held down at Oregon State last year?
No.
No, this is going to be different. How so?
The February 22nd is where all the STEM hubs will come together to highlight work from their region. So getting a real feeling for what's going on around the state.
What did we do at Oregon State then? I felt like that's what we kind of did then as well, right?
This is going to be more public facing.
Okay.
Oh, yes, so this isn't the hub convening.
Okay.
This is the hubs coming together to highlight their work for an outside audience.
Outside audience, okay.
Yeah.
External audience.
And it's just a,
it's a educators.
I apologize.
No problem. And then I'm going to try to be there and I just want to understand the difference. Okay.
Is there going to be another time to convene the hubs to share the work of the study that Oregon State is doing?
If I understand that there will be some interim sharing and then possibly, and probably at the convening on April 6th, which is the convening of the hubs and internal convening. April 6th and 7th.
For the data around money, can we say at the beginning when hubs were designated as hubs, and you'd like the money from there forward leveraged, or what is the best data information for you?
I think each biennium would be great.
Separated by budget.
Yeah. Whatever shows you in the best light, Kristen.
How's
that? Is that the answer that you were really looking for?
So on that topic, I do have my partner friend Jerry Ann, who data means something to her. So we want to make sure that we're not just inflating numbers. We want to provide something that you guys can describe very clearly, and so that was the source.
And for me, it's just every time that we measure something moving forward as we're starting, we need to measure it the same.
Exactly.
Or put big asterisks that we changed in some regard so we can have some data set we can do.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you all. March 10th in Salem, not in Portland, for the next STEM Hub, or STEM Hub, the STEM Council meeting. You know, all these things mixed up. So that will be
March 10th?
March 10th, Friday,
9 a.m.?
9 to 12 in Salem. And we'll.
Is it going to be at that library or the place we've had it before?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Maybe our conference room.
Yeah. We're in session, so.
Maybe our conference room even. I don't know yet.
We'll include in that conversation, that meeting agenda item, talk about kind of what's next for the innovation grants, and a broader conversation in terms of performance requirements, how they're doing, what's the next step, are they getting the results that we expected, so we'll have that conversation. And maybe more time to talk about kind of the plans and even scores. Okay. Thank you all. I will send out my comments again on Measure 98 to get a thumbs up. If you guys are okay with that, if I get a thumbs up, I will represent some comments from the council. If I don't, I'll just send them on my own. But
I'll be a lemming. Thank you to all the presenters today too. Thank you. It was excellent. All right.
Thank you all. Thank you all for your time.
Good.